June 1st. We are at the Orion Township Municipal Complex Boardroom at 2323 Joslin Road. Would like to open the Charter Township of Orion Township Planning Commission meeting. Could I have a roll call, please?
Reynolds?
Here.
Gross?
Here.
St. Henry, absent with notice. Urbanowski, absent with notice. Walker?
Here.
Bracken?
Here.
Gingell?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you very much. That leads us to item number 3 on our agenda this evening for meeting minutes from our previous meeting on the 18th. Is there any discussion? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Chairman, I move we approve the minutes for the May 18th, 2022 Planning Commission regular meeting.
Moved by Gross. Do I have support?
Support.
Support by Mr. Walker. Further discussion? Any public discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please state with aye. Aye. All those opposed, motion carries. Next leads us to our agenda review and approval. Any discussion? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Move we approve the agenda as submitted.
Motion, do I have support?
Support.
Support by Mrs. Gingell. Further discussion? Any public discussion on the motion? All those in favor, please state with aye. Aye. All those opposed, motion carries. Item number 5 on our agenda this evening is brief public comment on non-agenda items only. If you're present and would like to make a brief public comment, this is your time to do so. All right, seeing no one racing up to the podium, we have no items on our consent agenda this evening, and that leads us to new business, item 7A, PC 2018-31, Brown Road Hyatt House Site Plan Extension located at unaddressed parcel on the northwest corner of Brown Road and Hudson, 0932378075. Is the applicant present here tonight?
See him.
Okay. All right, there is an extension request letter in our packets this evening. Mind you, this project has been extended a couple times in the past as it is a 2018 project. Their attorney is working on their closing documents and it got pushed back to June 15th. This will mean that we're not able to pull permits or close prior to the deadline of June 2nd. And they asked for a short extension request of 3 to 6 months for your site plan approval. Keep in mind, so this was granted in September of 2018, extended again in October of 19, once again in April of 2020, again in June of 2021. So with that said, I guess open it up for discussion amongst us commissioners about the extension request. Thoughts, feelings? Go ahead.
It appears there's been a good faith effort to move forward with this plan. They've submitted their engineering plans. And they're getting ready for their submission of their pre-construction meeting and their fees. And based upon that, I would feel that an extension for another 6 months would be appropriate.
Okay, so have a discussion right now of 6 months. My personal opinion is with, I guess, an extension or a project that's been kind of out there for a while, would be entertaining probably more in the 3-month is my knee-jerk reaction, just to kind of keep some pressure on the project. It's been extended a number of times, but just my immediate discussion. So, additional comments, thoughts? Mr. Walker?
In the true sense of arbitration, how about splitting the baby in half and making it 150 days, if that's half?
It doesn't make a big difference to me. I'm just in the faith of, I guess giving an extension, but we typically don't give our 4th and 5th extensions. That's all I was going after. But if we feel competent in a 6-month or somewhere shorter than that, then I'm good with it. So if someone's willing to make a motion, I think we could entertain it and discuss it.
I would move that the Planning Commission approve the site plan extension request for PC 2018-31 Brown Road Hyatt House Hotel Site Plan for a period of 6 months. Thanks. This approval is based on the fact that the applicant is proceeding with the necessary submissions, and hopefully the 6 months would not necessitate another extension.
Okay. Understood. So we have a motion for 6 months on the table. Do I have a second?
I'll support it.
Support by Mrs. Gingell. Further discussion? All right, any public discussion on the motion? We have a motion to extend for 6 months with the effort of them not coming back after that. Any public discussion on the motion? This is in regards to this agenda item, yes, yep. Okay. If you
I
could
just-
state your name and address for the record, please.
Catherine Kennedy from Lake Orion. I actually question why we're having 3 hotels built on Brown Road when we have so many hotels in the region. I don't believe you even asked them what their capacity is and their vacancy rates are, did you? So why would we do that? I'm actually very upset they destroyed that entire woods in that section of property. We're going into a recession. We should not be doing new construction of anything, anywhere. And if anything, we need to be rehabilitating and selling the ones that have been for sale for years. We have commercial properties that have been open a long time in Lake Orion. Yet you're creating blight by authorizing extra new construction where we don't want it and don't need it. So I actually object to any new construction and any zoning changes at this point in time in our history, in fact. We actually have globalists taking over our region. I don't know if you've noticed, but there's an awful lot of activity going on that should not be going on. The World Economic Forum is a very risky group of elitists, just finished up their fancy little annual retreat in Davos, Switzerland, to decide how they should control the rest of the world, digitize us all. And Oakland County recently approved $3 million to take up those invitation to the Automation Alley that the World Economic Forum claims to have created in 1999. I can tell you what I did in 99. I stopped my investment business because I was going to be forced to go to electronic trading. And instead, I got hired with a global corporation because I was so good at Spanish. I didn't realize that at the time I was part of the big reset. All the American manufacturing plants that
Could you
used
wrap
to be
up your public
100%
comment,
America were moved to Mexico before I left in 18 years. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Additional public comment on the motion? All right, seeing none, could I have a roll call, please?
Walker?
Yes.
Bracken?
Yes.
Gross?
Yes.
Gingell?
Yes.
Reynolds?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you very much. Leads us to our next agenda item. That would be PC case 22-17, Senior Living Properties 2, Grace Living Center landscape review for 985 North Lapeer Road, parcel number 0902126007. If the applicant is present, if you could state your name and address for the record, please.
David Fulkerson, 398 Windstone Circle South, Oakland, Michigan.
Thank you. If you want to give us a brief overview of your request, and then we'll turn it over to our professional consultants for their review.
Can someone hook my computer up?
Yes, there is a HDMI cable up there, up on the podium. And if you'd like to plug into that, is that up? It is up there, Tammy? Sorry about, oh, sorry.
Tammy, can you help me? I can start talking. Thank you so much. In 1926, my grandfather moved to Michigan from Appleton, Wisconsin. He and 3 other young high school graduates all came to Michigan to work in the auto industry, and they borrowed money from a local dentist in Appleton to come. And to help illustrate the type of man my grandfather was, he was the only one to pay the dentist back. And over the years, all I heard from my mother was what an incredible father she had and how blessed and lucky she was. In 1984, he had a stroke that took away his ability to speak, so he moved in with my mother and I in Oxford, Michigan. And she took care of him for 5 years. I was in charge of exercise and back rubs, but she did the bulk of the work. It got to the point she couldn't handle him anymore. It was just too much work. So she moved him into a local place.
Can I pause you just for a minute? Tammy, if you plug that in, he might just need to put it to export, like function. So, I mean, it was working just previously, so. Yeah, so if you plug it in, do you know how to have a display export? No, here you go. I think it's going to come on right here.
There we go.
Thank you, Tammy. I was saying, I think it just need to be woken up. Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt. I just wanted to get our IT support some help.
So we moved him into a place that wasn't so great. And my grandfather just stopped eating. And I'll never forget the last time I saw him. I was sitting at the end of his bed, begging him to eat. He couldn't speak, so he couldn't express how he felt verbally. But he did it with his eyes. And it was one of the most difficult times of my life. Because he was a great man and a great grandfather. So, my whole life, I always wanted to build a better place. And I told this planning commission 3.5 years ago when we brought the development in that we were going to build a jewel in the community. And we won Best Senior Living in our first full year of operation. And I think we are doing it. I hope you have all heard of someone that's been in Grace, and we do our best every day. Our mission statement is for everyone to feel loved, listened to, and respected. And everything we do is to fulfill that mission. And we're pretty proud of what we're doing. It's hard work. So what brings us here today is, let me bring this up. So when we were developing Grace, our front sign was going to go in that yellow little box there on the north side of Manitou Lane, which is actually in Oxford Township, believe it or not, and everything south is in Orion Township. And we soon found out that we would be blocking our neighbors, the apartments, and the church, their sign. And we wanted to be good neighbors because they were great to us during the development process, and we've had a wonderful working relationship together. Here's, our sign would have been right there. Obviously, it would have been cluster, coverage, no good. So we agreed to move our sign to our front wall, which is parallel with Lapeer Road, which is not ideal. When you're driving 55 to 60 miles an hour, you got to really look over late to see something parallel with the road sitting back 100 feet. So when we were trying to figure out visibility, and 9 out of our 10 residents come from drive-bys, so it's extremely important. The trees that were proposed in the landscape plan were going to make this very difficult. And it was also going to block the signs of our neighbors. And we didn't want to do that either. We don't want to disrupt them. So we didn't put them in, which brings us to here we are today. The red circle are the trees that were not put in on the landscape plan, 15 trees in the front. And we have some people from the church and apartments that would like to speak sometime today to give their side of and their support of not putting the trees in. So obviously COVID, inflation, supply chain issues, it's been very challenging to be in the senior living industry. And it's been hammered because of it. So occupancy is extremely important in these times. So in terms of the jewel in the community, we were also voted Best Storefront Curb Appeal in both the Orion Review and the Oxford Leader. So we think we've brought a beautiful community to our community on the outside and on the inside, which you can't see. So we don't think the removal of the trees is going to be a negative, because the residents voted us the favorite commercial community in both townships. So we think we've done a wonderful job. There's the best curb appeal. We won that last year in the Orion Review. And there is best senior living in our first full year of operation. So that's the first item. The second item is there are 43 trees and 35 bushes that were not planted from the original landscape plan. We added 20 trees, 587 bushes, shrubs, and plants and grasses in 13 different areas around the community. We realized this layout of the whole community, the green line, horizontal line going through the middle shows the separation between Oxford Township on the north side and Orion Township on the south side. When the tree calculation was made for the replacement of the landmark trees, almost all of them were in that cluster up top. That was a wooded lot in Oxford Township exclusively. If you remember the old church that was in Orion Township, there was one huge legacy tree which is noted on the Orion Township side. But other than that, the trees on the Oxford side should not have been counted because Oxford has no tree ordinance. So it was a mistake by the landscape designer that didn't realize we were in two different townships. And then they just placed trees wherever they could put them because frankly, there wasn't a lot of space. Because in front of our communities are two retention ponds. We also have another huge retention pond in the upper, that'd be the northwest corner. And then you can see how tight we are around the south side of the building. So they put trees wherever they could put one without, damaging the site. And here's Jim's email that says, attached, please find a copy of the topographic survey with the trees in question denoted in blue. The specific tree tags are as follows, and he lists them. And then he says, since these trees are not located in Orion Township, they should not be required to be replaced per the requirement of Orion Township. That's from Jim Butler at PEA. We've got a couple letters. I'd rather them speak instead of talking to the letters. So let's see how our site looks today. This is the back view. This is the view from the back patio. Ten trees were supposed to be planted along this grassy area on the south side. It's a very steep slope, which is difficult to see, and you can see how the trees hang over. It was going to be very challenging to put trees in here, and it's very challenging to mow. My son and I mow the grass, and the tractor slips, so you have to mow it by hand, and putting all those trees in would make it more challenging and difficult to mow. There's another view of it. And then a kind of a close-up. I was trying to get everyone to see the angle. It's when you're on it, it's more severe than a picture. So we didn't put those in. And here is a drone shot of the parcel during construction, and you can see on the south side, which is the left side of the picture, more trees aren't required. It is a huge buffer zone there already, and it's a forest. So I think that's reasonable request. There is a view from the road, so you can see how I'm on our side of, so it'd be the west side of Lapeer Road. It's not easy to see our sign on that wall. It's small. Here's a view from the church, in front of the church, showing the nice grassy areas. It kind of looks like home. I never saw the grassy knoll in Daly Plaza, but I assume it was something like that, hopefully. So here's the landscaping that we added that was not on the plan for our residents, and they love our landscaping. We spared no expense to make it home-like. We put beautiful grasses and trees and shrubs and sod in. Rose's garden. Almost done. We put raised flower beds in, because a lot of our residents love to garden. We added these shrubs and bushes from a resident who moved in near the back of our community and didn't want to look at the generator and the transformer. So we have done everything to make our community beautiful. And we hope you are open and understanding to our predicament, where adding these additional trees would be cumbersome to our community. And that's all I have.
Okay, thank you very much for your overview. At this point in time, turn it over to Giffords Webster for their review of the applicant.
Thank you. So we did review the plans that were submitted on May 11th, and we had a few discussions with their landscape architect and engineers back and forth. Our re-review of this landscape site was only focused on the southern portion that was located in Orion Township. So only the property and frontage and landmark trees that were located within Orion Township were included in our updated information to try to clear things up a little bit, because many of the trees that the applicant just spoke about, like some of the ones on the hill there, were previously planned to replace landmark trees that were, Mr. Butler had pointed out, were actually in fact in Oxford. So with that said, you all should have a site plan review letter, or landscape plan review rather, dated today, June 1st. We were working with the applicant's landscape architect yesterday and today to get the plans and the information for you that you needed to review in front of you. So looking at that letter, as well as there's an 11/17 plan dated today as well. There's a few items I'd like to draw your attention to, as there are potentially 2 waivers being requested as part of this. So the first summary of the request talks about kind of what I just said there. The applicant is requesting a modification to their landscape plan for the exemption of 3, I said or 7 pending determination. I'd like you to discuss that, required plantings due to site topography and an attempt to keep a clear sign view from the adjacent church's sign. So the applicant just went over their request and described to you how some of the landmark trees were determined to not be in Orion. So after a review of the plans, it was determined that those trees were not required to be replaced, as they were either removable or they were located in Oxford Township. And they do note here on their landscape plan from today, AB-1.0, there's a table kind of by the north arrow there, calculation table from approved plan. So that's where I'd like to draw your attention to today. Those are the couple items that we're going to be discussing. So the first one, the first item that they have identified is the open space within Orion Township. 1 tree is required per 3,000 square feet of disturbed landscaped open space area. So based on that calculation, 15 trees were provided, or 15 trees were required. However, 11 were provided within the Orion side, and the remaining, there was an additional 16 that were planted in the Oxford side, because they were treating the site as all one under the Orion review. So just looking at the Orion side, they would technically be four trees short in the open space requirement. So that would be their potential first waiver that they're asking for from the Orion Township standards. The second item is described as the right-of-way frontage adjacent to a public road. So this is dealing with the Lapeer Road frontage within Orion Township along the eastern portion of the site. Per that calculation, 8 trees would be required along that frontage there. And they're proposing 3 trees, and they're not really along the frontage. They're really closer to the parking lot, and then they're requesting a waiver of the additional 5 that be waived. So that is the second waiver that they are requesting would be for 5 trees along the Lapeer Road frontage. And then they updated their parking lot landscaping to show that they meet the 1 parking lot's in Orion, 1 is in Oxford. They do meet the standards for that. And then the tree preservation, as I discussed earlier, we did review that with Mr. Butler's comments and agreed with him that the necessary trees were replaced, and the ones he identified as exempt were exempt. So with that, directing your attention to the letter, the 2 bullet points. So as I mentioned, 15 trees were required in Orion Township for open space and 11 are proposed. However, there are 16 in Oxford. So if you'd like to waive or consider that a standard that needs a waiver of 4 trees, that might be a good way to clean things up as far as the Orion Township ordinance goes. And then the applicant has requested that 5 of the 8 required Lapeer Road frontage trees be waived. And that was I'm discussing, as you can see in the picture up there, they wanted to preserve the views to their site. So those are the 2 waivers that are being presented to you today.
Okay, thank you very much for that overview. At this point in time, I'll turn it over to my fellow planning commissioners for initial thoughts, and if you have any questions for the applicant or our professional consultant. You want to kick off the discussion? Go ahead, Ms. Brick.
So I hope you understand, and I think a couple of us up here at least are going to have the opinion that the purpose of trees are not always about aesthetics or business. And having watched the Lorax many times with my children, it kind of makes you feel like you want to protect trees when you watch things like that. I can appreciate the 16 additional trees that were planted in Oxford by mistake, and I can also appreciate the problem that planting the trees along Lapeer Road may cause for viewing of the signs. I guess would be open to or consider or I don't know, personally happier if you proposed planting the number of trees, just put them somewhere else.
So how many? Are you referring to the 5 in the front and then the 4 that weren't planted in Orion?
I guess I was going to say, let's have a discussion or get some thoughts, and then we can circle back, and, I mean,
Yeah, I mean,
would be my suggestion
I
to the
don't,
discussion.
hadn't thought of an exact number, but the number that you're asking for a waiver for would probably be in the ballpark.
9.
Just my thoughts.
So I've watched the Lorax with our 3 children as well, and it was heartbreaking. I get it. We did plant 16 trees, to your point of adding trees in the site wherever we could and to make it look nice. And so I think we've met your objective by overplanting. I mean, we only needed 8, we planted double. So the Lorax would love us.
Additional comments?
I would like to hear from the other 2 business owners that wrote letters. Are we going to hear from them today?
Yeah, if we would like to invite them up, if you would like, otherwise they'll have an opportunity for public comment during the motion, either way. So if you would like to hear from them,
Yeah, he didn't speak to the letters, so I'd like to hear
yep,
from
if
them.
you state your name and address for the record and
Good evening. My name is Robert Wick, and I live at, excuse me, 980 Manitou Lane. That's directly behind Grace Living Center. We've lived there about 50 years. I'm a member of the Orion Oxford Seventh-day Adventist Church. I have been for nearly 50 years. I've served in various leadership capacities. I'm currently a local lay elder, and I'm here to speak on behalf of our church board, our church leadership, and our church members. We have some real concerns about the planting of the trees on the north side of Manitou. We have safety concerns, we have concerns over the blockage of our sign, and we have concerns over the additional maintenance cost that would imply or bring upon us. That's a busy intersection there where Manitou hits 24. There are many cars entering Manitou and leaving Manitou, coming from the center, from our church, from the apartments, from settlement of Manitou, and from the neighborhoods directly behind the church where we happen to live. And anything that would block that open view that's presently there, we feel would be a real hazard, particularly in the morning and in the afternoon during the school year, when there usually are a number of cars parked right down by 24 for dropping off or picking up their children. And anything that would be an additional obstruction to vehicles either coming in or leaving Manitou would just intensify that risk factor, we feel. Another concern that my colleague and fellow member Chuck would like to address briefly, if he could, is the blockage of our sign. I won't go into detail on that, but a number of years ago, our church invested a sizable amount of money to buy that lot in front of the church. And we did that so that we could maintain good visibility from the road. And the trees, if they go in, particularly for northbound traffic, that would be a real problem, we feel. And the third item I want to briefly mention is additional maintenance costs. Originally, I was thinking that there were 19 trees that we were talking about on that side of Manitou. And our lawn care provider has told us that that would increase our cost rather significantly because of the mowing around and the trimming around that many additional trees. We're a small congregation. We are, any cost increase at any level is a real challenge for us, and that would be an additional challenge, we feel. Last week, my understanding is, I wasn't able to be present, but my understanding is the Oxford Township granted the waiver, and we would respectfully urge you to do the same. It would be extremely helpful to our church, and I thank you very much.
okay, thank you very much.
Mr. Chair? I just had a couple clarifications.
Go ahead.
So it was sort of discussed in the previous comments there. None of the trees would be proposed north of Manitou Lane on any adjacent property. It would all be on the applicant's property. And we've also asked them to denote, and they show on here, the clear vision triangle. So that would be there to satisfy any, you'd be able to see into the driveway and all the signage and everything. So I just wanted to clarify that for you.
Yeah, thank you for that clarification.
And to clarify, Oxford Planning Commission last week approved the removal of those trees on the north side.
Thank you. If you want to state your name and address for the record, please, and give us your thoughts, comments.
My name is Chuck Hickson. I'm a parishioner at the Orion Oxford Seventh-day Adventist Church. I'm a deacon, and in my role, one of my roles is to manage the electronic sign. I've been doing it since we've got the sign, and you're fighting all the time right now with the traffic traveling at 50, 60, sometimes more miles per hour, and to put any blockage on the north side means people aren't going to even be able to see the sign until they're even with it. And if they do, that just wipes out the advantage of the sign when we do that. The sign has become one of our better methods of communicating to our parishioners and to the public the different programs that we have going. It'd be a shame if we let it get blocked.
Understood.
Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Okay, now that we've heard from some of the neighbors that are related to this request. I'm sorry. Okay, go ahead.
My name is Tony Dorda, and I'm in Lake Orion here. I've been living here for 22 years, and I live at 1191 Richview Circle. I have been attending the church now since 2005. I have held various positions in the church, deacon, the treasurer, etc. The first thing I want to mention is I want to echo what Chuck and also Robert Wick mentioned. And we have established and fostered a great relationship with Grace Living from the onset when they were bringing the center to fruition. And my concern is also the same, which is I think we're addressing the south side of those trees, not the north side, but the south side. And I have tried to drive purposely looking at going northbound, and as you're driving there, these trees have the potential for blocking the church sign. We had to build that church sign according to dimensions and everything that was approved by the city. And one of the things is Dave was talking about getting more residents and building up that center, and for a good cause. We're also in the business of trying to build our church through evangelistic series and a whole bunch of different efforts that to us are very meaningful. Our marketing is word of mouth, knocking on doors, and different aspects of how we evangelize in the community. And the sign is one aspect of it. And I feel that, just like my colleagues, both Robert Wick and Chuck Hickson, that blocking that sign as you're traveling northbound would be a real detriment to our church. So I thank you tonight for listening. Appreciate that.
Thank you very much. Thanks. All right. With that said, I would like to turn it over to my fellow planning commissioners for their comments. I'm going to kick off with mine. Again, seeing as how that we're looking at the Orion Township side of this project, not the Oxford Township portion. My personal feelings is that there's a ability to plant some of those trees elsewhere on the site, and to me it seems from the proposed planning, knowing that back when this was approved that there was going to be that large vertical wall there, and seeing its current condition with out any plantings there, I think there's a way to compromise between clear vision, even providing some access to the sign going north and southbound while still having additional plantings on the site. One of my thoughts is potentially, compromising on the trees on the east side of the detention pond and still having them in front of the wall, especially, I understand there's other plantings on the site, but this is landscape requirements as it relate to other people in the community visualizing this site. So that's where I'm kind of looking at this request. So I'll start there if there's some additional comments, questions for fellow planning commissioners.
Chair, I have a
Mr. Walker,
question.
go ahead.
Matt. Unless I'm missing something here, I don't see how the petitioner's request is going to affect either the ingress or egress at Manitou Lane, or either of the other concerns that the parishioners are having. Or am I missing this? I mean, couldn't we resolve this with the petitioner and not affect these folks?
It does appear that the eight trees that are required along Lapeer, they're required between Lapeer Road and the parking lot. So you can see there's 3 of them down there, but there's a little bank of 5 parking spaces, and there's 3 trees with the sort of the X through them. Those are the 3 that they're proposing. So they really need 5 more of those. And as you can see, anywhere between Lapeer and the parking lot, it's, to echo the chair's comments, it does appear that there may be room to add that in there without affecting the ability to see the sign along the road, especially considering the direction of traffic, and that northbound would be on the further side, so there'd be a.
Or even the church sign as far as that goes?
Correct,
Okay.
yes.
So this can't be, I mean, I'm sitting here thinking, I'm missing something, but I don't think I am.
Yes, and
We can do this to make everybody happy, I think.
absolutely, and typically the trees, that would be required there would be a little bit higher up too, so you'd be able to see underneath them when they're mature, so, correct, yes.
Thank you.
Additional comments from fellow planning commissioners?
Mr. Chair, I've been on the site, I've looked at the site. I think they've done a very good job with the development and the landscaping on the site. I think the landscaping that has been added is been for the benefit of the occupants of the development, the residents of the complex. And I think there's some consideration that needs to be taken into account, recognizing that, you know, there's been an upgrade of the landscaping relative to the internal workings of the development. In total, I think we're talking, what, 7 trees combined that they're asking for a waiver of? I don't think it's going to make it or break it one way or the other. I think, you know, to satisfy the requirements of the ordinance, there's probably a couple of ways you could put 5 or 6 trees on either side of the wall fence, but I think they've done a nice job, and it reflects on what's on the site.
Thank you. I would agree. I think the landscaping on the site, the building is beautiful. I think the key here that's the struggle for me is I acknowledge the need for a clear area between signage and clear vision area when you're turning out of Lapeer Road. But I think, you know, the 4 trees were short and the 5 along, M24, where if it was planted adjacent to the wall, away from the sign, you have plenty of space. I mean, I'm looking at street view images right now that are quite stark, in my opinion. You know, I think it could utilize our landscape requirement to provide that buffer between where we are on M24 and the proposed development. So that's why, I would be in favor of still requiring the trees. I'm fine with a modification to pull those away as previously proposed, where it was all around the detention pond, but I think there's an ability to, pull those closer to either side of that sign, still have the sign be visible and not affect a clear vision area. So, my thoughts. Additional comments?
Question, is it true that Oxford does not have a tree ordinance?
Correct.
Well, shame on them. Okay, thank you.
Additional comments? Guess if there's someone willing to make a motion to further discuss, we could entertain one. And
We're going to have public comment. I think the departments wanted to
I'm going to offer public comment once a motion's on the table. Thank you.
I guess I'd like to hear if he has any response to what we've said thus far.
So I guess comments in regards to, motion, I guess, or consideration of a compromise between what you're proposing and what was previously proposed.
So I think with the 16 trees on the Oxford corner, we've met the requirement for the 4 trees, over-met it. And the residents of both communities voted us the best-looking place in both communities. So it's not like we're taking away from anything with not putting the trees in front, so we have clear view. Our building is what sells us. People come in because we all like to live in a nice house. It doesn't change just because we need to go into senior living. I don't want anything blocking that beautiful mountain resort look that my wife spent countless hours trying to develop. And the only place we could put them would be between the 2 retention ponds, where you can see the rocks that separate the drainage, and the wall. That's also a pretty steep slope and difficult to mow. It's hard to tell from the picture, but we'd have to put them in there. That's the only place. I just don't think I don't think it'll add to it. That's just me.
Okay, understood. Guess if there's someone willing to make a motion, we can consider the motion and discuss it further.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the Planning Commission grants a landscaping plan approval for PC 22-17, Consensus Senior Living Landscape Review, located at 985 North Lapeer Road, parcel 0902-126-007, for the plan state stamped and received 5/16/22, and I assume that's this plan here.
June 1st.
Based on the following findings of fact, that the request is to reduce the number of trees from the previously approved plan by a total of 7 trees out of hundreds that have been planted on the site. The landscaping that has been added to the site adds additional landscaping on the interior of the site, which is provided for the benefit of the residents of the development. And the topography of the site, both on the east and the south sides of the development, provide slopes that are difficult to maintain, and the addition of additional trees in there would make that even more difficult.
Okay, I have a motion by Mr. Gross. Do I have support? Any support on the motion? Okay, I see no support, so the motion does not carry. Is there someone else willing to make a motion for discussion? All right, I will make a motion. I move that the Planning Commission deny the landscape plan approval for PC 2022-17, Conscientious Senior Living Landscape Review located at 985 North Lapeer Road, parcel 0902-126-007 for plan state stamp received June 1st. This denial is based on the following findings of fact, that I believe that there are still areas where the required landscaping can still be provided on site while maintaining a clear vision area for Manitou Lane and the adjacent signage for the church, with the thought that additional landscaping could go between the detention basins and the landscape wall. Do I have support on the motion?
Support.
Support by Mrs. Gingell. Discussion.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir, Mr. Walker.
part of me feels badly about denying this, but my heart is to deny it, because I would like you to make some, you see where we are here. And I think some small concession by your thoughts of these trees and putting them someplace, even out of the way somewhere, could solve this whole thing. I would hate to have this motion to deny and let you leave here with nothing. Would hate to see that happen, I do.
Okay?
But it would seem to me that when we sent it back to you, you came back saying, this is, what you asked for in your request is what you want. And it seems that, I don't know how this is gonna vote, how it's gonna go, but it might be no, and then you can leave here just like you were when you got here. And what a frightful waste of time I think that would be. If, for a couple of trees, and I'm a tree hugger, I'm a big tree hugger, for a couple of trees to have this thing not go forward, I think it's a shame.
So we have 3 trees on the south side by the retaining wall. We could put 3 trees on the north side of the retaining wall, between the retaining wall and Manitou Lane. That would balance that, and it's not a steep slope there. So we could put 3 trees there. Hopefully, they don't have to be very tall, because I don't want to block the view of the building as southbound traffic comes. If you look at the back of our community, I mean, it's a unique site. There is slopes all over the place, as you can see. So here's the spot where we have more room. It's extremely severe down into the wetland. There's a retaining wall where those kind of weeds are as well. It's about 10 feet high. We could try to plant the 4 trees that Mr. Bracton wanted on that slope, and 3 trees in the front would be 7 trees. Would that be reasonable to you, Mr. Walker?
It's not important if it's reasonable to me, it's important if it's reasonable to the 5 of us.
Okay. Well, to you specifically.
To me, that, it makes sense to me.
Okay.
And that would make you happy if we did that?
That would make me happy.
I just want to be clear about where you're proposing, because you lost me on the south side and north side of the retaining wall.
Okay.
Can you go over that again?
Yes. Let me find that overhead shot. All right. Well, that one doesn't show the trees. Hold on a second. Where's the one showing the trees? I'll find it here. Here it is. Okay. If you look here, there's 3 trees right here outside of the red circle, 3 birch trees. See that?
I do.
That's the south side of the retaining wall. Here's the retaining wall. It's going right through here. We could put 3 trees here that match these 3 trees in a little clump like that. And then we could find some space to put 4 trees back here, which is also on the, well, it's not on the Orion side. Unfortunately, right between the buildings, this line you can barely see is the dividing line. I mean, we might be able to get them in Orion, but does it really matter if it's 10 feet one way or another if we put them in? If it does, we'll figure it out.
As a follow-up to Mr. Walker's concern, I echo, I'm not looking to, just deny a project. I understand that this project spans between 2 townships. What I would like to clarify would be is I understand that there's been a significant amount of trees proposed on the Oxford portion that, in my opinion, the 4 trees short, is not really where I'm getting hung up on. My area where I'm getting hung up on is the requirement of the right-of-way trees. And I think that that divide is where I'm looking to have that screening between parking, even though it's elevated, and M24 Lapeer Road. So one thing I would like to clarify with this discussion would be is that as proposed, which is what we're looking at on the screen right now, versus what we were provided here tonight, those 3 trees are kind of shifted around that corner, not up at the front of that. So I would be willing to essentially compromise here, but I would like to see those trees with the original intent of them dividing between M24 and the parking that's provided, not tucked around the corner, you know, whether it be on Oxford or Orion side, doesn't matter, but I guess I'm leaning towards this being on the Orion side, on the parallel face of that wall adjoining Lapeer Road.
The east side of the lot.
Correct.
You want them between M24 and the retaining wall.
Correct. Versus like the 3 trees, you know, I'm looking at this, 5 more trees on this plan, you know, has a little bit of compromise between, you know, your signage, the parking, you know, and similar to what you have originally proposed, you know, so this image that we're looking at here tonight, you have those 5 or 6 trees as you originally proposed on the west side of the detention, east side of the parking adjacent to that wall. I think that's, you know, to me, though that right where your cursor is, those rows of trees, right?
Those 2 and these 2 here.
Well, I'm asking for that whole requirement to be addressed, those 5 trees that provide that buffer between them, not them getting tucked behind. The intent of that ordinance piece is division of right-of-way and parking.
So it won't be tucked away. The 3 trees here would be direct line of sight for our parking on southbound traffic. They would be right here. And what if we put those 3 trees in there and then 1 here on the side of our sign and 1 here on the side of our sign to meet the 5 that would block the least amount of our building as possible?
I don't want them venturing into the site. I want them to be adhering to our ordinance requirement of the right-of-way adjacent to public right-of-way, which would be venturing towards closer to that sign, not tucked around the corners. So I guess if anyone else has additional thoughts on a discussion here,
I guess my question is, what's the objection to putting them, you know, where he's asking?
It's a difficult slope to mow. If you go to the site, it's steep down into the retention pond. It's going to be tougher. I mean, I mow it, my son mows it, and it's not easy. And we probably have to hand mow it, but that is what it is. Because you can't drive a tractor around that and up. It just doesn't work. You got to go sideways and you got to lean. And if you're not going in a straight line, it's tricky. But it is what it is if that's what you would like us to do.
Yes, that's what I would be seeking personally, is to adhere to our right-of-way frontage. Our general slopes, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but we typically review those not to exceed a dimension, and I think we're fighting a personal desire of not hiding the building versus adhering to our landscape requirements, in my personal opinion.
True.
So there is a motion on the table to deny at this point. There's been some discussion. If the applicant would be willing to, I guess, address this discussion that's been had. If fellow planning commissioner has a different thought process, I'm all ears, but that's my perspective is to look for those trees between those detention pond and the wall as they're originally proposed.
So if we could go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it'd be all across the wall, keep them away from our sign as much as we can. We'll check visibility, we'll drive. When you're driving 55 or 60, you don't have that much time to look over to a parallel sign. But, you know what I mean?
We understand that. But we're talking landscaping here.
Right.
Right? So we got to focus this discussion on, so I want to be very clear that when we're talking about of what we're seeking, it's not around the corner. It's parallel to that wall, not on the curve, but on the parallel that's parallel to M24 that would screen the bulk of those spaces between the building and M24.
Well, the 4 would be right in front, per your request.
Yep.
And then the other one would be, see, the wall just jogs sideways at about a 35 or 40-degree angle. It's still in front, and it would totally block the parking lot from southbound cars. So I think it would meet your objective.
Okay, thoughts on that as fellow planning commissioners?
Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir.
I'd say the existing plan, I'm not sure if where he's talking about, but it looks like there's already a tree in that area, a parking lot tree. I don't know if he's talking about, I don't know if there's room to plant it between the drive and the wall, but it looks like there's already a parking lot tree in that area.
There's room for us to put another one in there to block. Unless you just want, if we put 5 in the front, one's gonna have to go right in front of our sign to make it look balanced, which is the last thing we like to do. If we do 4 in the front and 1 as close to the front as we can, like right on the corner, so it's meeting your needs, but if we put 5 across the middle, one's got to go right in the middle or it won't look good.
Okay, I'm going to do this to speed along the discussion. So I would like to amend my motion. Well, I guess, do we have to have a formal vote to pull that off the table?
You
Can I
would
have a vote?
withdraw your motion.
I'm going to withdraw my motion. So I'd like to make a motion to approve with conditions. And I would expect a revised plan to be submitted to the township with a review of our professional consultant, Giffords Webster. I would like to clarify the landscape requirements. I'm not concerned with the first parameter in which was outlined tonight about the 4 additional trees that we're short on. What I am in reference to is the right-of-way frontage trees adjacent to a public road, which we are 5 trees short along M24. In reference to the existing or the originally approved plans or currently approved plans received May 16th, 2022, I would like to see those trees as currently proposed be provided to meet that requirement, and it be provided parallel to M24 between the west side of the detention basin and the east side of the retaining wall.
Can I clarify, ask a question?
Yeah, hold on, do I have support, I guess? Oh, support by Mr. Walker. Clarification on the motion?
Your motion is just for the 5 trees.
Correct. So in clarification here, I don't have my ability to plug in, but if you would, I don't have a click here. Let's see. Let's see if I can apply. So to clarify my motion, I'm waiving the requirement for the 4 adjacent trees or not requiring that as my condition, but the trees that are shown here and the trees that are shown here to be provided to meet that requirement that is currently being missed, to where it's parallel to M24 and it's in front of that wall between the parking and the detention basin. So essentially meeting the requirement as it was currently proposed, which eliminates the trees along M24, but still meets the requirement for between the detention basin and the retaining wall.
And the reason it's 5 is because they've already planted those 3.
I guess my motion would be is if they're gonna move some trees around, right, we're gonna call those three as, and maybe you can clarify, it's 3 as currently proposed, correct? So I guess in general, that would be is 5 plus 3, or however, all of these trees that are proposed now would be in that frontage.
Can we clarify, are those 3 trees planted right now?
Yes, these trees, those 3 trees on the southeast corner of the retaining wall are in already, so we could put those 5 in. I see on that plot, that would be fine because our sign's in the middle, and that would be fine. We can do that.
Tammy?
Okay, so I understand the motion that to reference the ones that you're requesting them based on a plan dated May 16th, but keep in mind that we had a June 1st.
Correct.
We had the charts that were necessary, so I'm not sure you got into that.
So I guess to clarify, my intent is in reference to the currently proposed plan that was resubmitted in reference here tonight. Not the modified plan, but these trees move between the two plans. So I'm trying to reference that these, when you go to the proposed plan, as currently approved, there's one location. When you go to as proposed, these trees move around the corner. So I would like to see these along M24, and that's why I'm trying to reference that other plan.
So, but for our records, we're going to need a plan,
Correct.
which contains the charts that the planner needed,
Correct.
which are on the ones that are in front of you that are date stamped June 1st.
Okay,
But what you want to see on that June 1st plan
yes,
is the landscape as reflected on that May 16th, but only those that were on, as you
Correct.
described.
so to clarify the motion, it's in reference to what's currently approved, and the modified plan, as discussed here this evening, needs to include the charts as required by our planning consultant. Do you have amended support on the motion? Mr. Walker?
I will support that amended motion.
Okay, further discussion. Tammy?
And is the planting type the same as proposed? I know that he had mentioned something maybe not as tall.
In my perspective, as long as it meets our tree ordinance, and it's right now it's shown as a deciduous tree, I'm fine with that.
Is that going to be an issue?
I think that's fine.
And resubmit and be re-reviewed by the planner?
Correct, just because I'm making that conditional to where I'm not expecting to see it, but that they validate that that revision has been made. Further questions, discussions? Fellow planning commissioners? Public discussion. Go ahead.
I'm Randy Timms. I'm from Manitou Lane Apartments. I've been there 28 years now.
If you could make sure you speak into the microphone so we can have you on record, please.
I've been there about 28 years now, and I'd hate to see any trees go out in front to block any of the signs. And the sign they have out in front of theirs is really nice, and I'd hate for them to have to block that at all. That would change that whole building front.
Understood.
That's all I have to say. Thanks.
Thank you for your comments. Additional public comment on the motion? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Walker?
Yes.
Bracken?
Yes.
Gross?
No.
Kinjal?
Yes.
Reynolds?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for your presentation. Leading to our next PC case tonight, 7C 22-19 Oakland Business Park Buildings A and C Site Plan Amendment at 163 and 187 Premier Drive, parcel 0935-476-001 and 0935-476-004. Before we get into this case, would like to just disclose the fact that myself and my company have completed plans on this project previously. I had nothing to do with this proposed amendment. We didn't have anything to do with the overall site plan approval except for general renderings. So I don't believe there's a conflict of interest, but I would happily step back if someone felt that there was.
I don't see it's necessary.
I don't think so.
All right. Okay, thank you very much. With that said, I'll turn it over to the applicant for their presentation. If you want to give me your name and address to kick things off, then that would be great.
I'm James Garrison with Shremshock Architects, located at 7775 Walton Parkway, New Albany, Ohio. I live at 7675 Middlebrook Lane, Columbus, Ohio. Please don't hold that against me. So really, to summarize what is happening with this presentation and why we're here proposing modifications to the approved site plan was our firm was contracted to essentially build out the existing buildings that are at the Oakland Business Park. The business park here consists of 3 buildings. In Building A at, I think, 163 Premier Drive, Building B at 180, and Building C at 187. If I misspoke on those, I apologize. But that, basically 3 buildings. So Building B is in existence, it's open for business, it's built out. Building A and Building C are in development. The shell buildings were existing when we were brought into this project, and our involvement is essentially building out the inside and then adding mechanical, electrical, plumbing systems to those buildings for that. The submission that we sent in was to show kind of how we were integrating mechanical, electrical systems into the building. Building A was by far the most restrictive. What we found is when we started to go into this project, there is on the east side of the building, north is up in this orientation. On the east side of the building, there is a detention pond. On the north side, there's parking, but the entire length of the building from the building face out 45 feet is a gas line easement for Consumers Energy. And then on the south side is a very tight drive aisle and then restrictive topography. So if you happen to be familiar with Building B, there is a mechanical yard on the west side of the building that takes up quite a bit of space. And because of the restrictions on the site and the limited ability to develop anything, the proposal was to put in chilled water cooling towers on the west side. And with that, a boiler room building that services those and distributes the hydronic piping through the building. In addition, the electrical distribution, there was a pad on the east side that is frankly a little undersized for what was necessary. And in order to prevent building out into the detention pond and to facilitate distribution throughout the building, we were hoping to put transformers on the west side. So essentially, concentrating everything on the west side would make everything work, essentially. I had extensive conversations with Consumers Energy to try to figure out how we would have green spaces facilitating their needs, as well as slight encroachment into the gas line easement, which was allowed by their easement language, and they were okay with. But essentially, what we end up having on Building A is some visibility of these things on the west side of the building. So as such, we talked with several entities, the planning department here, as well as Fire Marshal Williams, on relocating a fire hydrant. And essentially, we have this, where there's a screening wall. The front face of these cooling towers are open, free air to pass through them. So rather than trying to put a wall up tight to there and change the drive aisle, we kind of kept the drive aisle where it was, put the cooling towers where they are now, and used that drive aisle as the free area, and then moved the screening out on the other side of the drive aisle. Here you can kind of see a section, some site views going from all the way down from Lapeer Road, as well as several locations on Premier Drive. We have screening shown at 8 feet right here, and then we're incorporating some natural elements. We would expect that to be evergreens, but essentially there's no real, I'd say, net change from the landscaping plan that was previously approved. What we're really trying to do is focus strategically that natural screening in a position that would provide better or less visibility from down Premier Drive and Lapeer Road. We also moved the boiler room specifically onto the corner of the building to provide additional screening so that the adjacent building here, as well as the boiler room building, would offer additional screening. To address some of the requirements of breaking up the facade and the Lapeer Road overlay design guidelines, we were proposing to add pilaster elements on the outside of the building. These are things that were added to Building B, and previously approved by the commission, if I'm not mistaken. I am unsure whether that was through a waiver or that was determined to be acceptable, but we were going with the same idea there. And as far as the boiler room building, it was CMU in order to kind of facilitate the construction, but we're looking for it to be compatible with the building, both in shape, angle of the roof, and materials. So it would be 2 tones of block, one to match the higher, lighter color metal on the side, and then darker at the base. Based on the breakup of the building in the back with the every 100 feet of green space for the consumer's gas, and, kind of a little bit nod to classicism, I know it's not a classical building, but having to pilaster 4 of them to break up the facade into 5 different sections seemed reasonable. And then on the side, 2 pilasters to break it up into 3 sections. Switching over to Building C, we took a lot of what we learned and tried to do at Building A and carried it over to Building C. Now, Building C doesn't have the gas line easement in the rear of the building, so ideally that's where we would have wanted to put everything anyway. And this is where we show it. That's where we propose it. Now, we did not want to ignore Bald Mountain Road, but there is a greenbelt area between the road and the building and the proposed paving. So the landscaping covers some of the infill of that and shows kind of a natural screen along the whole length of the building. And we felt that that was fairly sufficient, but we treated the exterior the same way, where we broke up the facade into 5 sections essentially, where we have 4 pilasters on the front and 2 on the side. Now, it's a little bit of a bigger building, but, in terms of looking at one versus looking at the other, that's what we were trying to capture. One of the things I'd like to show is in the back of Building C, obviously, in the winter in Michigan, the leaves all go away. And so I think there may be some, in the approved landscaping plans, some evergreen elements, but there is a significant density of trees and shrubs in the back currently. So this is the back of the building. Obviously, the pilasters would be added. The boiler room and other things would be in the back, similar to the design that we're proposing at Building A. And then across that pavement is, over this berm is where Bald Mountain Road is. When the reviews came back in, there were a couple things that we updated slightly. So during the review, Fire Marshal Williams had some questions on distances of fire hydrants, which I think may have been in some of the material that was circulated in the reviews. And we shared with him some specific plans showing distances of fire hydrants between each other, making sure that all worked out. I included in the original submittal, as well as the packet in front of you, which is slightly modified to address some things, the life safety plan. And the life safety plan is to kind of show where circulation is in the building, where doors might be, and how that integrates with the parking. I think originally there was an observation that the accessibility parking was different than what was in the approved site plan. And what we're trying to do is make that work a little bit better with the function of interior of the building, now that identification of what's going in there is there. One of the comments that was made was updating the elevations to show some of the equipment. So on the west side of Building A, here's what it would essentially look like. Now, obviously, these are very large things, and that's kind of why we're proposing natural screening as well as an 8-foot wall. But that kind of shows you the relationship of the equipment relative to the size of the building. The building is rather short, and the equipment is rather large, but again, it's to kind of focus everything into one tight spot and having to deal with some of the restrictions on the site. In the back of Building C, I will elaborate a little bit more that the drive aisle that was back there, which was closer to the building, was pushed out to facilitate some of the requirements for the mechanical electrical systems. So we have, we worked with Fire Marshal Williams to make sure that he was satisfied with the travel of a fire truck through the site. At one point, I was told that the dumpster that was located and previously approved on the site plan on this northeast corner was needing to move. And frankly, I think the bigger issue was that all of the refuse could be contained within one location. So rather than putting something in a dumpster and then taking the dumpster to a compactor, I think everything was needing to be facilitated in the compactor anyway. So that I think was brought up in one of the reviews, and that's kind of where that landed. The last thing that I'll say with respect to Building C is there was a comment about kind of how the screening on the back of the building was. We didn't want to, even though I keep saying the back of the building, it's the front of the building relative to Bald Mountain Road. So we're not necessarily ignoring that, but what we did in terms of the design of everything is we added the pilasters on the building front and back, treated them the same, with the exception of where the boiler room building is. But the back of the building still has facade elements that break it up at the same cadence that is on the front of the building. We took a look at the way that the section kind of cut through the back of the building. Now, I did not go out and measure these trees, but these trees are shown to be about 30 feet tall. I know that the existing trees are some of them are taller. But here you can see that the relationship of the back of the building, the berm, Bald Mountain Road is right off the view right here. And it seems as though it's adequately screened based on what we've seen. The civil engineer's site plans and the landscaping plans capture a lot of the work that, you know, is absent from our drawings, but only because we're not trying to make conflict coordination-wise with them. If we were to look at what was previously approved on the west side of Building A, you can see evergreens, deciduous trees, and 5 more evergreens here. We're not necessarily proposing anything different quantity-wise, but perhaps shifting some things strategically to get them into a better location for screening. So a tree right here on the corner, which would not be able to be done anymore, would likely be moved across the drive aisle. And then at Building C, where there is noted absences of natural screening, there are trees and shrubs added to that area to capture the intent of the green belt restriction on that area. So essentially what I'm trying to say is that most of everything that's here and what we're proposing in terms of amending the site plan or changing the site plan that was previously approved was mostly born out of the fact of necessity of building out the building and trying to incorporate systems, and not necessarily, I'd say, change from anything that would otherwise have been there with any other submittal. Okay. Before I conclude, I just wanted to ask Brian if you had anything to add. I'll do it just because you asked. If the commission is okay with it.
Yep, go ahead if you would just can state your name for the record, please.
Brian Biskiner from Powell Engineering, 4700 Cornerstone Drive, White Lake. You really hit it pretty good. My role was trying to impress upon them the fact to stay within, especially on Building C, stay within the footprint of what was previously approved as far as the pavement and the bank parking. They did. They stayed in the footprint, and they didn't affect the previously approved landscape plan on the east side of C in any way. I think it can be installed just the way it's shown. And as you mentioned with Building A, we might have to move a tree, but mainly we kept the site plan as previously approved pretty much intact. So but he hit it pretty good.
Okay, thank you very much. If that concludes your current presentation, I'll turn over to our professional consultants for their review, starting with Giffords Webster.
Excellent, thank you. So our review is dated May 25th, 2022. And I'm going to just really briefly hit we all just heard a great summary of the project and what they're looking to do and some of the reasoning behind that. So I'm going to hit on most of our summary actual comments. So regarding Building A, as they mentioned, the addition is in that location given some of the constrictions on the site. They are rearranging and removing some parking. However, the site requires 88 spaces. They provide 99 with an additional 20 banked. So they have a surplus of 31 spaces. No issues with parking. Very minor changes proposed to the landscaping plan. They did mention those evergreens that would be proposed to be screened there. However, I don't believe they were listed on the plan, what species they were. So just the final plan to make sure that is included. And then for so they meet those standards. The addition is going to match the existing building. So Building A was compliant with the ordinance. Building C, they also have a surplus on this site of 55 spaces. So the parking is good. Our plans did not include any changes to the landscaping plans by the applicant. Regarding this particular building and its frontage along Bald Mountain Road, we understand it's not a very heavily traveled road. However, given that this site does lie within the Lapeer Overlay District and that portion of the building is abutting a public roadway, we just wanted to bring to the Planning Commission's attention that there was a few standards that the applicant, I think, addressed. Facades greater than 100 feet in length shall incorporate projections or recesses. I think they tried to address that, so we would ask for that to be confirmed. And then some of the other standards, but as they mentioned, they're working within existing buildings and matching that. So we would just ask for your confirmation that that still meets that. As far as the Bald Mountain Road comment, though, that road does have a proposed right-of-way of 86 feet, which is wider than currently shown. So when you take into account the 43-foot half right-of-way, there is a portion of that landscaping along that eastern side of the building, C, that abuts Bald Mountain Road, that potentially in years to come, if Bald Mountain Road were improved and widened, would not be under the applicant's control at that point. So if you'd like to require any additional screening there, that could be a consideration. However, as we're not aware of any plans that would remove that. And they showed you pictures of what that looks like. And then there was a few other revisions that they talked about the dumpsters and then some stairs and ramps and sidewalks that are being relocated. So really it was just confirming that the buildings still meet the intent of the Lapeer overlay standards, and then discussing any potential landscaping improvements along the east side of Building C.
Okay. Ask you a question?
Of course.
Did you say that Bald Mountain Road currently is 43 but has a right-of-way for 86?
I don't, I don't have the,
Half of the,
yeah,
measured from the center of the right-of-way, it is 86. So it could increase that right-of-way width. So it's 86, 43 from the center line of the road towards the building is what they have a right.
43 in each direction. I believe it's 60 right now, so it's a little narrower right now, but there's a planned right-of-way that may essentially increase it 13 feet towards the building, and it wasn't clear what of that landscaping could be removed or what, that wasn't addressed, the future right-of-way. So it's nothing that's in any plan, any near-term plans, but it was just a point of information we thought we'd bring to your attention.
I was just confused by the numbers, thank you.
No problem, I confused myself with them too, so.
All right, at this point in time, we'll turn over to OHM for their review.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Our letter of May 26, 2022 summarizes our first review of the amended site plan. From an engineering standpoint, this is pretty straightforward. They're making some minor adjustments to utilities and retaining wall and drive alignments, basically to accommodate this additional mechanical equipment that was not foreseen in the initial planning stages that's now needed. So as mentioned, there's a hydrant being relocated for Building A. No changes to sanitary sewer. The storm sewer behind Building C, looks like it's going to be needing to be shifted and/or the catch basins shifted to accommodate the drive aisle changes. There's some parking in drive aisles being bumped out and relocated a little bit, but nothing that of any concern. We'll obviously get more details at engineering that we can review. We did receive a revised grading plan for Building A. Everything looked okay, but we didn't get a revised grading plan for Building C, so that's something I would like to see included in the site plan. So, overall, it was our opinion that the plan was in compliance with the township ordinances and engineering standards. We just asked that any site plan approval be contingent upon the 5 items that we summarized in our conclusion. Number 1, that the grading plan for Building C be updated to reflect the changes proposed to the retaining wall and drive aisle. Number 2, the pavement sections shall be included in the amended site plan that match the original pavement cross sections for the development. Number 3, that the landscaping plan be updated as mentioned. And number 4, the parallel parking stalls need to be 22 feet in length on the north side of Building C. It looked like they had room to accommodate that. And of course, number 5 is that they proceed through with engineering after site plan. That summarizes our review. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, thank you very much for your review. Also in our packet here this evening, we did have a review from our Public Services Director without any concerns that there was ample service to be provided. There was a review from our Fire Marshal in regards to, he did have comments that were addressed via email, but have asked for those to be addressed in future submittals to go on record. There is a WRC review in our packet here this evening. There was a site walk completed amongst a handful of other reviews. At this point in time, I'll turn it over to the commission for their comments. I'll kick off with a couple of just big picture items. I personally feel that the proposal meets the Lapeer overlay design standards as currently submitted. I don't have an immediate concern for the landscaping, additional landscaping in regards to the right-of-way along Bald Mountain Road at this point in time, as long as previously proposed, is still being met, that any of those blank areas are still being provided. Overall, it seems like, there's obviously modifications to provide additional mechanical space based on the use in these buildings. I would say they look good to me. I keep in mind that some of these changes that are being proposed are because the original approval was just a spec building, and this is looking to be a singular tenant. So a lot of those are driven by, going under one kind of ownership or operation. So I think that's a cleaner approach in my perspective too. So with that said, turn it over to fellow planning commissioners. For thoughts?
These are plans that we have seen previously. These reflect, excuse me, some modifications to those previously approved plans, some minor modifications to the building facade and location of some of the parking because of the utility requirements for the buildings. A lot of these have already been accomplished, have already taken place relative to the relocation of the parking on the 2 buildings are different than what was on the approved plans. But again, they were necessitated by the requirement of utilities to service the buildings. I concur that the architecture, the design, the elevations are similar in nature to what we previously approved. I don't see any major changes that would require us to alter that approval.
Additional discussions? If not, I'll entertain a motion if someone's willing to make one, and we can further discuss the motion on the table.
Mr. Chair, I'll move that the Planning Commission grants a waiver for the Lapeer overlay design standards in Ordinance 78, Section 3504B, one for the facade and exterior walls for the east wall of Building C facing Baldwin Road, facing Bald Mountain Road for PPC 2219, Oakland Business Park Buildings A and C site plan amendment located at 163 Premier Drive, parcel number 0935-476-001, and 187 Premier Drive, parcel number 0935-476-004, for the plan state stamped and received May the 11th, 2022, based on the following facts: that the existing site design, including architecture, parking, driveways, etc., are placed in a manner which makes the application of the standard and practical. Number two, this represents minor modifications to the previously approved Lapeer overlay design standards, and would be one condition that a color rendering and landscape plan for the planner's review of May 25th, 2022 be a condition of the waiver.
All right, I have a motion to have support. Support by Mr. Walker. Further discussion? Seeing none, any public discussion on the motion? Roll call, please.
Bracken?
Yes.
Walker?
Yes.
Gross?
Yes.
Gingell?
Yes.
Reynolds?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you very much. All right, I believe we have another motion that would be required for the project. If someone's willing to make that, we can discuss.
Relative to the site plan, I would move that the Planning Commission grant site plan approval for PPC 22-19 Oakland Business Park Buildings A and C site plan amendment located at 163 Premier Drive, parcel number 0935-476-001, and 187 Premier Drive, parcel number 0935-476-004, for the plan state stamped and received May the 11th, 2022, based upon the following conditions: that the revision is necessary to accommodate the relocation of utilities, and the approval is based upon the following conditions: that the applicant resolve any of the issues related to the planner's review of May 25th, and also resolve the issues related to the township engineer's letter for compliance of their report of May 26th, 2022.
All right, I have a motion to have support.
Support.
Support by Mrs. Gingell. Further discussion? I have one request for the motion maker, that we include the fire marshal's comment for the revised plan to include his, there was emails exchanged that addressed his comments that he asked to be provided in the future submittals, so they would go on record. I can pull up that review here if I can. Park planner, public service, fire marshal. He had a comment in his review letter. During our review, it was noted that hydrant locations were missing from the submittal. After further discussion, documentation that was provided via email, both were missing items have been addressed and confirmed, but we recommend that the applicant provide revised drawings showing this missing items as discussed on our email correspondence.
A further condition would be to incorporate the fire marshal's review relative to the revised plans indicating fire access.
Do I have a revised support?
Yes.
Support by Mrs. Gingell. Further discussion? Seeing none, any public discussion on the motion? Roll call, please.
Gross?
Yes.
Walker?
Yes.
Bracken?
Yes.
Gingell?
Yes.
Reynolds?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks for your presentation. All right, next up, we have item 8A on our agenda this evening for unfinished business, PC 21-90 Ridgewood PUD concept located at 625 West Clarkson Road, Sidwell 0915226-007, the vacant parcel west of 625 West Clarkson Road, Sidwell 0915226-006, and the vacant parcel east of 625 West Clarkson Road, Sidwell 0915226-008. This project has been in front of us previously, and we did have a public hearing on this project, so public comment will be able to be made once a motion is on the table, and we'll go from there. If the applicant would like to make a presentation, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good evening, Commissioners. As was mentioned, we met with you in your first meeting of the year in January about the project Ridgewood and what we have attempted to do. And then further in April, received your approval for an extension to allow us to get our engineering details in order for resubmission. Daniel Johnson, my apologies. So with that, I'd like to kind of cover briefly an update to the project to bring it up to speed in terms of our recent submission. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, so once again, Ridgewood, located on West Clarkson Road. So coming out of our meetings in January primarily, our objectives were to respond to the prior Planning Commission Board of Trustees input and review comments. And what we talked about at the meeting was to achieve the right balance between the site design, land use considerations, and the need for housing. And in addition to that, one of our objectives was to respond to the community goals articulated in the Orion Township Master Plan. At the same time, consider the pending future master plan implications, even though it's currently going through a review process. So in that light, what we've done is really a couple major things. One is we've changed the type of unit that's proposed for the project. That is going to a duplex unit instead of a townhouse-type unit. And in that context, the duplexes are all one-story ranch or one-story structures as opposed to the two-story structures that the townhouse units were configured around. That would allow for reducing the building height and visual impact of the overall units and the project in general. And then secondly, and probably more importantly, we have reduced the density by 40%, going from essentially it was 50 units in the prior submittal to 30 units in the current submittal, which results in addition to a density reduction, a reduction in traffic by 40%, and takes the unit count down to less than 3 units per acre. And in terms of general things we want to do with the resubmittal was to maintain a clustered housing site design approach, and in a more minor way, we've shifted the east entrance slightly to the west to increase the side yard in that location. So we talked a lot about the need for housing at our last meeting and sort of broader market trends. This is a recent article from I guess, in April. And I think a lot of the spirit of this is, I think, captured in some of your master plan updates that you're going through, but it's the trend towards, whether it's accessory dwelling units or duplexes or triplexes, it's, you know, an attempt to achieve some sort of modest densification within the context of current planning thought. So you've seen this before the survey. Just as a reminder, it's composed of 3 parcels that you see depicted here, all in all about 11 acres. And as we discussed last time, a large part of the property in the western portion is primarily open. This is a view looking to the south. So the revised concept plan really has 15 buildings on it. The duplex is obviously times 2, there's 30 units, so there's 15 buildings that are located around on the property. As I mentioned earlier, the east entrance was slid slightly to the west to increase that area in terms of the natural features that occur there. And we still maintain the alignment with the west entrance to the street across the way to the north, which we had talked about last time. So the road configuration by and large remains as it was. It's simply the units become 1 story and the number of units changes to 30. The detention area got slightly smaller given what transpired with the design revisions, but not too significantly. And you can see a little better the sort of the clarity of the units here in terms of their locations. So with respect to the floor plan, again, it's a duplex unit. So what you see on the right side and left side is really a mirror image of the floor plan, but it's about 1,800 square feet, 2 bedrooms with a flex unit or an office space that is potentially there, 2-car garages, and as I'll point out that they're recessed 5 feet from the front of the structure, and then in addition to that, there's a porch element that would extend beyond that, which is, I think, consistent with what your ordinance required. And just a conceptual elevation of what that appearance would look like, the imagery for that. Again, repeating what we talked about last time, the open space design amenities, again, there's a meandering walking path of about 1/3 of a mile or so and a gazebo element. So introducing pedestrian amenities for the residents, whether it's walking their dog or taking a walk or jogging, whatever the case may be, to take advantage of the open space that's on the property. And in terms of the updated site plan metrics, to summarize, the open space, usable open space is about 4.55 acres, which is almost 44% of the property. There's other open space, which includes the wetlands and detention area, and in total, you'd have almost 7 acres of open space, or over 67% of the site, which results in a units per acre of about 2.64 using the gross acreage, and then building envelopes, which I'll come to further in a minute, is about 1.31 per acre. And as I mentioned, the walking path is about 1/3 of a mile through the open space. From a traffic standpoint, in addition to, as I mentioned earlier, the traffic from the prior proposal would be reduced 40%. This is an excerpt that's on your submittal in terms of what the traffic statement said, but essentially will not contribute significantly and will not pose a negative impact. Also, just to mention again that if we were to go forward, the Oakland County Road Commission, or RCOC, I should say, Road Commission, Oakland County, wanted a left-hand turn analysis done in the future, which we're more than willing to do. That's for the west entrance. And just to summarize again, the environmental sustainability initiatives that we were proposing using the best management practices for stormwater design, the new Oakland County standards, which were adopted late last year, which fundamentally provides for infiltration and rain garden kind of technology. As indicated on the landscape plans, we're planting approximately 300 trees and would also have a tree fund contribution of 120 trees. We would propose a LEED certification for the duplexes, which includes a number of the features, whether it's water-saving plumbing fixtures, high-efficiency systems, Energy Star appliances, And uniquely, given the age that we live in, providing for EV connection in each duplex unit for those who may want to purchase an electric vehicle in the future. We talked about this a little bit last time, but just some excerpts from your current master plan in terms of how that speaks to the housing objectives within the community. So providing for a variety of high-quality housing types and range of densities and lot sizes. So we think the duplex units provide for an element of range, if you will, and would also fall into the category of alternative housing styles and attached single-family dwellings, which would be the case. So then jumping to your future land use draft, and we recognize this isn't formally adopted, but it's going through a public notice period. The subject property would fall within a single-family high-density area, according to your future land use draft. And the site is also located about a quarter-mile east of some general commercial areas. So they're easily walkable, potentially. Also, within your future master plan, which you're all familiar with, the residential density plan, the subject area would be an area that would indicate a 3 to 5 acre unit per acre density range. And within your draft, as well as within a lot of planning publications in the last 10 years, there's discussion about the missing middle housing. And if you read through the literature on that, a lot of that addresses a range of sizes and types, but duplexes are often indicated in that discussion, just for general reference. So we did just a quick envelope. This is a building envelope site comparison summary. So looking at the current zoning, which is on the left, which is R1, there would be potentially building envelopes 15 in terms of the quantity of number of homes, if you will. Under the proposed PUD that we're talking about conceptually, is there would also be 15 building envelopes if you divide 30 divided by 2. And in the future land use condition, which I think is included in our submittal, if you do a lot layout, you would end up with 22. So you think if you look at it on a building envelope basis, which I think speaks to impact on the nature of the site and the property, you're really talking about 15 structures, albeit they're in combination in the case of a duplex. So again, an excerpt from your PUD ordinance, again, encouraging alternatives to traditional subdivisions, encouraging innovation and greater flexibility in land use, and less sprawl in terms of a sprawling form of development. These are all excerpts from your ordinance. And then with respect to density within your ordinance, there are optional provisions, which I think your planner has pointed out. So it speaks to density credits, and so in the black text is excerpts from your ordinance, and the blue is what the project proposes to do. So we felt we could check the box in terms of number one, it's a cluster development where we exceed the 20% open space. Number two, we've addressed an enhanced surface water quality and groundwater quality with using the new Oakland County Stormwater Design guidelines, excuse me, and utilizing infiltration and rain garden type technology for each of the units in the project. Number three, preserving natural features. Certainly, a large part of the project does that in terms of preserving the wetlands and the number of landmark trees that are located along the south and east portions of the property. In addition to that, as I mentioned earlier, planting 300 new trees and providing for a contribution to the Township Tree Fund of 120 trees. And then in terms of number four, contributing land or amenities that represent community benefit, we had proposed in earlier discussions to create a conservation easement for that wetland natural area on the southeast corner, and then contribute right-of-way, of course, to Clarkston Road as part of the project. Just briefly touch on the consultant letters that were received, I think, late last week. I think OHM mentioned the left-hand turn warrant analysis, which we've certainly have no issue with undertaking at the appropriate time. We do have a question on the Giffords-Webster review letter about a 10-foot green belt around off-street parking, which we can maybe clarify that when they get to their comments. And then again, to summarize the community benefits, we feel that we're responsive to the master plan objectives, provide housing options for the township. The project is 67% open space and land conservation. We are, obviously doing stormwater management system BMPs. We're contributing to the township tree fund to the tune of 120 trees. We would propose a proportional monetary contribution to the pathway system, additional dedication to Clarkson's Road with the right-of-way. Projects like this create jobs, both from a construction and a supplier standpoint. It expands the community tax base, and I think it responds to the general need for housing, which I think everyone acknowledges is an issue right now in our world. So, happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. At this time, I'll turn it over to Giffords-Webster for their planners.
All right, thank you. So we have a review letter here dated May 20th, 2022. I'm going to hit, since we had just kind of heard all of the changes from the project, I don't think I need to reiterate or repeat any of those. So I'm just going to hit some of the highlights and then kind of address the applicant's question, because that was one of our requests after, or for the final submittal. So looking at page 3 of our review letter, which is a kind of a summary of the following 10 pages, the concept plan proposes a density of 2.64 units per acre. As was discussed by the applicant, the current master plan talks about 0.5 to 1 units per acre in this area, and the proposed 2022 draft does increase or suggest a slightly higher single-family density in this area in the R2 to R3 range. Looking at the zoning, the density falls between R1 and R2. An R1 development would yield about, just without environmental constraints, about 2.5 dwelling units per acre, and an R2 would yield about 3.2 units per acre. So this falls kind of right in the middle at 2.64. And as we mentioned, there are some environmental constraints that bring that actual yield down. We did have a note here, I'll note it here. In the original submittal, there was a zoning plan where the applicant submitted a plan of what could be developed under the current zoning, which is R1. The new submittal replaced that with an R3 zoning. We would just ask in the final submittal that both of those be submitted, because the ordinance does require a current zoning underlying plan. So we've already seen it, we just want to make sure it's all together there. And then one more comment on the zoning. As you may be aware, two-family or duplex units are not permitted in single-family zoning, so that would sort of be a deviation from the zoning ordinance, but which is why I believe they're pursuing the PUD. They talked about the open space, 38% usable and 62% total, which exceeds the PUD standards. There really weren't any changes to traffic, site control. We just kind of talked about the ultimate density shall be recommended by the Planning Commission and determined by the board. But as I mentioned, the current density is proposed at 2.64. For the base zoning regulations and regulatory flexibility, as I just mentioned, the current project type is permitted within the township's multiple family zoning. The current building placement meets the established setback standards for the proposed R3 zoning standards, aside from the unit spacing, obviously, because they're attached. So the project type would need to be approved by the Planning Commission, as you already know. And then really, just comment number 10 here. The PUD ordinance talks about transition and grade changes from the existing residential areas. So we would just like to see a little bit more information, either some renderings and cut sheets to really make sure that the planning commission understands the transition areas. It looks like they're heavily screened or proposed to be heavily screened. So we would just ask for a little bit of additional information about how that was, how they arrived at that. So if I could also, so I kind of just summarized these few pages here. If I could bring your attention to page 9 of our letter. This was just kind of the couple of zoning modifications that I mentioned. The R1 underlying district does require a 40-foot front setback. The PUD proposes a 35-foot front setback. So that would technically be a 5-foot adjustment from the underlying zoning. However, the PUD ordinance does contain a provision, which I'll talk about in a moment, that allows for a 35-foot front setback for multiple family components. So we believe that this is in line with the intent of that. The density would need to be, based on their R1 underlying zoning plan was 15. They're proposing 30, as they just mentioned, same amount of footprints, just twice as many units. So the modification there would be the density credit. And as I've mentioned a few times, single-family detached units are permitted in this zoning R1. They're proposing duplex, so the modification would be the multifamily component, 30.03E2, which is on page 12, and I would like to direct your attention there. These are for the multiple family component with a gross area of 10 acres, may incorporate the following, or may incorporate multiple family, provided that all of these are met. The one comment from the applicant, D in this section, states that all off-street parking lots, all off-street parking areas serving 3 or more dwelling units shall provide a 10-foot wide green belt around the perimeter of the parking lot. And we did observe, I believe there's 4, there are little banks of like 5 parking spaces for visitor parking, but under this ordinance, those would technically just need a small 10-foot green belt around them in order to allow for the multifamily component. And right underneath that E is where we talked about, or I mentioned earlier, that the building setbacks may be reduced to 35 feet in the front, and they do meet all of the 35-foot perimeter setbacks. So to satisfy this requirement, we would just ask that the 10-foot screening around the parking lots with either some shrubs, typical green belt plantings, be incorporated into those parking areas. And on page 14, as I mentioned, this is really the 2 items that we wanted to see were the previous R1 zoning layout for the site, as well as the 10-foot green belts for the final PUD submittal. And we've listed your next steps for action here, which I'm sure you're all familiar with, but those are your options, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you very much for your overview. At this time, we'll turn it over to our OHM for their engineer's review.
Okay. Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Our letter of May 23rd, 2022 was our 3rd review of the concept PUD. As indicated, the applicant is proposing 15 duplex units for a total of 30 units. We took a look at the density plan just from a planning perspective. They've provided adequate room for stormwater management. There's really little to no impacts to wetlands. So those 22 lots, appear feasible. So we really don't have any concerns with the density plan. Water, there is an existing 12-inch water main along Clarkson Road. The applicant is proposing to extend 8-inch main into the site. At the time of final PUD, we are going to ask that the applicant loop the main through the site. As far as sanitary sewer is concerned, there's an existing gravity line out in Clarkson Road. It's relatively shallow, So the applicant's not going to be able to extend gravity main into the site, but rather is going to construct a lift station near the southwest end of the site, which will pump up into the gravity line in Clarkson Road. We've taken a kind of cursory review of the downstream pump station. It looks like we may have some capacity issues. We brought that to the developer's attention in previous reviews. They've added a note indicating that they acknowledge that requirement, and those downstream improvements would be part of their responsibility. We've also just noted a note in here, the franchise utility easements. We're going to ask for those to be shown on the final PUD plans. That'd be for gas, electric, et cetera. And just a reminder that we're going to make sure that those do not overlap with the exclusive water main easements or sanitary sewer easements. Preliminary detention calcs were provided, meeting the new township standards, and those appear acceptable. We will get more details as we proceed through final PUD and engineering. Traffic and circulation, pretty straightforward. They're proposing a 27-foot wide back-to-back road with 5-foot sidewalk along both sides of the street, meandering pathway, and an 8-foot wide safety path along Clarkson Road frontage. No issues with circulation of the Orion Township Fire Department apparatus. As it was previously mentioned, we are making a recommendation that a left-hand turn passing lane be provided for both the approaches. The applicant has added a note to the plans indicating their willingness to undertake that warrant analysis at final PUD. Let's see here. One other thing I've just pointed out, that there is a typical dimension on the plans showing that the distance between the driveway and the sidewalk is 20 feet. That gets a little tight if somebody doesn't pull all the way up or whatnot, so maybe some consideration could be given there relative to some more space. Grading looks pretty good. It's you know, you've got about 30 feet of fall on the site, but the proposed grading that was provided appears to meet township standards. We'll take a closer look at final PUD. Wetlands were delineated, a copy of the report was provided. Per the current plan, there are no impacts to wetlands or even the 25-foot buffer that the township requires. So from an engineering standpoint, it was our opinion that the concept PUD is in compliance with township ordinances and engineering standards.
All right, thank you for your review. There was additional reviews from our public services agreeing with OHM's comments, specifically one of which is looping the water main. And since this is a concept for our recommendation here at the Planning Commission, the Fire Marshal had no additional comments at this point in time for the concept as presented. Let's see here if I'm missing any other reviews. I think that's it. So I'll turn over my fellow planning commissioners for their initial comments. Want to kick us off? Don't all jump out at once.
Mr. Chair, I believe this represents a kind of a, I would consider it a major improvement over the initial submission from 50 two-story units to 30 one-story units. You know, it's a major reduction in terms of the density, and it's kind of curious how I was able to reduce the number of units by so much in such a short period of time. But having said that, this is a concept and eligibility plan. It does not represent any final approvals or things. I think there's a number of issues that need to be addressed yet. If this goes beyond the concept and eligibility stage. One of the concerns I have is what we've been talking about on the master plan in terms of creating vistas along our major highways. And Clarkson Road always came up as one of those areas where it would be nice to establish a vista along the highway that recognizes the current landscaping or wooded areas along the street. And I don't think that this plan necessarily reflects that, but there may be ways to improve upon that. The PUD ordinance also requires that majority of the units have side entrance garages as opposed to front entrance garages, so that the development does not appear to be one of a parking deck or a parking structure, but of a residential complex. And as the engineer indicated, there's also a concern about the room between the garage and the street in terms of whether or not there's sufficient area for a car to park in the driveway and not interfere with either the sidewalks or driveways within the complex. We were shown one form of architecture, and I'm curious as to whether or not each building is going to look the same, or if there's going to be a variety in terms of the architecture for the complex. And that's one of the considerations relative to PUD consideration. And the issue of unified control. If the applicant can identify whether or not this is going to be a rental project or a condominium for sale project, which will assist in addressing, I believe, or at least allow us a way to address the issue of maintenance of the open space. If it's going to be under a management control system or under an HOA, as to how the maintenance of the open space is going to be controlled. I don't have a major concern relative with the reduction in the number of units from 50 to 30 and a density of 2.6 units on an overall site. As the planner indicated, that kind of falls right in between the range of the residential zoning requirements of 2.5 to 3.2 dwelling units per acre. So in terms of the density impact, I think it's consistent with the current zoning and with the proposed master plan. So I guess those are some of my initial concerns before we move forward.
Understood. I'll add a couple of comments here. I do appreciate, obviously, the transition from 50 to 30 units. Significant decrease in density there. I still personally have a concern just with the density as proposed. Even, our master plan, we thoroughly went through a lot of these districts, and we're still calling it out as medium-low density and considering that as a recommended density of 1.5 dwelling units per acre, and 2.64 is being proposed. So we're still a significant amount over and above, I guess, even as our current to-be-adopted master plan is considering. I go back to PUDs in general in the sense of why they exist, and I don't believe they exist, or I know they don't exist for the sense of gaining density, but rather a creative zoning tool to address limitations on a site. So I appreciate the parallel plan of 22 lots. You know, I would also just like to acknowledge that that's with one access point, which means those homes would be suppressed. You know, if it had 2 access points, there would be some fewer lots being proposed in that parallel density plan. So although I think the PUD as submitted here tonight does make some valid efforts, I still think there's an opportunity to greater acknowledge the surrounding area as it's currently zoned, and acknowledging that large lot, single-family homes exist, especially as it relates to our master plan, even though some density amounts have increased with our current master plan, it isn't a significant increase. My other concerns are related to just setbacks, right? You know, I understand a PUD as proposed allows for 35. I would see, you know, with this site, why not have 40 feet along Clarkston Road to maintain those corridors that we're looking to propose? You know, I think there's some compaction to the site that would be further kind of rectified if there was a few less units being proposed there. So that's my initial comments. Additional thoughts? Mr. Bracken?
I think we sit up here and we talk about the general need for housing in this area almost at every meeting. And I think we have to look at this as what are the potential options available for this particular site. And what I see is probably the best option that we're going to see that makes and takes into consideration economic reality. From what I understand, the option, or the most desirable option, would be single-family units, anywhere from, who knows, 15 to 22, small subdivision with, you know, single access point. That economically is probably not viable for a builder to come in and do that. This, now that they're single-story, and I compare this to, only because I've been in it many times, the little community, Stratford Village, off of Lapeer Road next to Chicago Brothers there, is very similar to what's being proposed here. And for over 20, 25 years, they've kept that up beautifully, and those duplexes there. So I think that this falls within what we're looking for, and is the best option for the preservation of the natural features, minimizes the density issues, minimizes the number of buildings that we're going for, but still allows and responds to the general need for housing here. So I think at this stage, I love this proposal. There are some tweaks that probably need to be made to it, but I think I don't want to, in a demeaning way, say it's the best we're going to get, because I think it's very good. I think we should consider that.
Additional comments?
I agree. I appreciate all the changes you made since your last presentation. This is much better. I'd still like to see what it's going to look like from Clarkston Road. What the buffer is going to look like, what the landscape plan is. I can see it, but I can't visualize it with the path and everything from Clarkston Road. So I would like to see that on a future plan, if possible. But overall, much better than it was.
As a follow-up comment, I just would like to address, you know, I fully support multifamily. I think that's a modern tool that's going to be utilized, that we're going to see more of. I think my comments strictly are rooted in the density that's being proposed. You know, if you say 22 lots were kind of the viable effort, you know, then why not 22 units versus 30 is all my original thinking processes. But I agree, there's some nice benefits to it. I still challenge when you look at PUDs and the master plan, right? Like transitional zoning, and does it fit within other zoning areas? I don't think approach of kind of, hey, this is a good, right, that we can't ask for better. Additional thoughts, questions for applicant, professional consultants?
Did we answer if it's a rental
Yeah, I
community?
guess we can circle back to a couple of those.
I was under the impression they
Two
were for
questions,
sale.
rental or for sale, and then the other question was, are they all going to have similar facades, or is there going to be a variety of colors or materials?
With respect to, as we talked about at the first meeting, these are for sale product, and it would all be under a unified control with the homeowners association. So there would be commonality of maintenance throughout the project. With respect to, I'm sorry, your second question.
It was about the architecture. Is it going to be same for every unit? Is there going to be a variety of materials and
I
colors?
guess the architecture we felt we could deal with in a more elaborate, more expanded way in terms of a final PUD, but the thought process, we'd have some variation throughout the project.
Okay.
With respect to one other question that came up, our understanding of the ordinance is with respect to the side entry garages or the 5-foot setback, if you will, it was either or, and you could apply that to 50% of the project. So it's one or the other applied to 50% of the project. We've proposed to apply it to 100% of the project. So that's our understanding of the ordinance, to clarify that point.
So is it your intent that there would be some garages that are going to be forward present versus being recessed as currently shown? The one plan that we do see here, is that going to modify from unit to unit?
Well, there would be no side entries, if that's your question.
No, I guess my question would be, is this the plan that's going to be utilized for every building that's being proposed?
Yes, that's the intent. You're
Okay.
correct.
Okay.
I also know there was an issue about parking and parking in the driveway and that kind of thing, and dealing with homeowners associations from a legal standpoint in the past, I would assume that there's probably going to be some ordinance or within the homeowner association that doesn't allow you to park in your driveway. In other words, requires that you be either in the garage or in the designated spots. That's based on my experience, but not 100% with this one.
Yeah, I guess if the applicant could clarify if there were the concern of the engineer speaking to the space between the garage and the sidewalk, is there going to be any regulation against that? Can that area be increased to provide a full parking
We can
space?
certainly look at making some adjustments with that. I do know that was kind of tight in terms of our layout considerations, but we can certainly look at that from a tweaking standpoint.
Additional thoughts, questions, comments?
I tend to echo your comments regarding the number of units. I think reducing the number of units would provide more flexibility on the site in terms of opening up some of the things that we've talked about in terms of access and green spaces along the roads and stuff like that. So I would not discourage a reduction in the number of units, a little bit more to make it a little bit more compatible.
I mean, my comments are rooted in the fact that you have all single-family homes around that area. Acknowledging that, you know, future developments may not be all single-family, doesn't mean they can't meet the density. So I just am cautious in proposing a density that isn't double, but, you know, is in some ways of how we currently master plan it is double, in density in the sense of, you know, we're proposing a RM use that doesn't exist along that portion of Clarkson Road right now. And as master plans south of Clarkson Road, north of Walden Road, east of Baldwin, right, are all single family, or I'm sorry, medium low density master plan zoning. You know, so even though that density credit has increased, we don't have a whole lot of that venturing into that area as we looked at as a township. So I think that's where, yes, if it's a duplex product, I'm in full support of that. That meets some of our efforts as a master plan to say, where's our missing, you know, middle housing, right? But doesn't mean that you have to come in and still be double, right? Is it better than 50? Absolutely, but if you said, all right, a reasonable zoning on this site was 22 with suppression, right, give or take this, but why not closer to 20, right? I think that, to me, then acknowledges, you know, the transition between, you know, you're looking at this image here where there's homes to the east, to the north that are all single family that exist and have existed, so. Additional thoughts? Guess if someone's willing to make a motion, we can consider that. Keep in mind that this is a PUD that's being proposed here tonight, so the Planning Commission at this point, we're making a recommendation to the board for the concept as presented here this evening. The board is involved in the process. There's multi-steps. It would come back to us if the board agreed, disagreed, or should I say agreed? I shouldn't say disagreed, but if someone's willing to make a motion that we could consider. One other comment that I wasn't too keen on is I would rather have trees be addressed on a site versus a contribution of 120 trees to our tree fund. Was another thought as it's conceptually proposed. There's a 120 tree contribution to our tree fund in the township. You know, so I just think that for me was one more thing towards the density comment that tells me there needs to be some more push and pull on the site.
Well, what is that making up for? In other words, why is the 120 contribution?
It was our landscape architect's opinion that there really wasn't a lot more space to add trees to the site.
Yep.
You're already kind of maxed out your planting, you know.
So our ordinance does allow a replacement, right? In the ordinance, there's an area that says we can consider a contribution to the tree fund.
But was the amount that you were deficient 120 trees?
I don't think we were deficient, we just couldn't find the space on the site to locate the 120 trees.
That was my question.
From understanding the growth and maturity considerations.
Yes, was there any tree calculations provided on the concept plans?
Do not recall, I don't believe so.
Okay. So typically it's based on legacy tree replacement, removed trees, you know, so yes, there could be the factor that an applicant such as this chooses to contribute greater than the required replacement, but in general, you know, my feeling is for those things to be resolved within the site, especially something like this where we have it. Go ahead, Tammy.
Well, and keep in mind that there's been many people that have read this section of the ordinance many ways. So I would be curious how the applicant read the ordinance, whether this was every tree being removed or landmark versus protected, and are they protected within the building envelope and infrastructure to the point that are there truly 120 that meet that criteria of being landmark?
Or were they being generous and over-contributing?
Or were they in community benefit, just saying, here, that's one of the things I'm offering as a community benefit is the monetary value of 120 trees into your tree fund.
So without the clarification, I guess, was there a clarification of what you're required to replace on the site?
On sheet L1, there was a landscape summary which went through a whole series of calculations. I believe that addresses your question, but perhaps the planner could.
I believe there was information, I think that we had indicated in our previous letter that they may wish to show how many trees are being removed or saved versus in R1 or R3 development. I think that was our comment, but we didn't get into the actual deep dive of the landscaping review. We just kept it more conceptual.
So it appears that under their calculations, they're saying total replacement required would be 164 trees at 2-inch caliper or 6-foot evergreen, and 161 trees at a 3-inch caliper or 8-inch evergreen, 8-foot evergreen, and there is 44 trees at 2 inches provided and 161 at 3 inches provided, and therefore, so it does appear that the trees paid into the tree fund, at least from my understanding of this, would be is making up for the gap of the 120 trees that aren't necessarily provided under their replacement for 2-inch deciduous or 6-foot evergreen.
And those were?
Those are directly from the plan as submitted from the applicant on page L1.
Again, at this point, at concept and the way,
Yep.
multiple ways that this ordinance is read,
Yep,
the applicant might have to go back and look at
understood. Yeah.
whether
There's
those
some
are
flow to it.
landmark or protected.
Yep,
I would just add that on page 4 of our review, under the recognizable benefit 1A, where it's preservation of natural features, we did note the eastern half of the site, which contains significant natural features, including woodlands and wetlands, is proposed to be preserved. A tree survey for the entire site indicates this site contains 69 landmark trees, with 12 proposed to be removed with replacement. It is unclear how this removal rate compares to a permitted development. So that was the depth of our landscape review.
all right, thank you. Thanks for clarifying that. All right, further discussion, considering a motion to further discuss? Someone's willing to make one?
I will consider a motion.
Okay. Go ahead, Mr. Gross.
This is going to be, well, let's see how it goes. Since this is a PUD and represents a development concept and eligibility, I would move that the Planning Commission forwards a recommendation to the Township Board to approve PC 2021-90 Ridgewood Planned Unit Development Concept and Eligibility Plan located at 625 West Clarkston Road, being Sidwell 0915-226-007, the vacant parcels of west of 625 Clarkson Road being Sidwell's 0915-226-006, and the vacant parcel east of 625 West Clarkson Road being Sidwell 0915-226-008. I'm not going to reference necessarily the plan state stamped, well, I will mention the plan state stamped May 9th, 2022. This recommendation represents a concept plan consisting of a missing element in our housing market, with the caveat that density remains an issue on this parcel, and the further reduction in the number of units would improve the flexibility in meeting certain ordinance requirements. Specifically, reviewing the density requirements of the residential zoning, the underlying single-family zoning district, setback requirements of the current zoning of residential, a landscape border on Clarkston Road, providing a vista of landscaping for the character of Clarkson Road, the review of the design of the units reflecting all front and no side entrance garages, and that the architecture of the units be provided to provide a mixture of design of materials and colors so that they are not all of the same mixture. An identification of the project, be it under unified control, and is the project to be rental or ownership or ownership of the maintenance development company for the open space. and other factors that were raised in the planner's report of, whatever it was. The latest report.
Okay, I have a motion on the table to recommend approval of the concept with a number of, what would you call, recommendations or concerns, maybe?
That's, the specific plan is not.
Okay, so I have motion, do I have support?
Support.
Support by Mr. Bracken. Okay, further discussion. Any additional comments? So, anyone want to lead us off? I guess I'm a little reluctant. I understand where you're coming from, I guess, on the motion. I'm a little reluctant in the sense of to recommend approval with these items. You know, I wonder if, is it kind of framed like a conditional, you know, motion to deny, you know, or to approve if, you know, type of a thing, or, you know, based on these factors, and if then that gives some findings of fact for the applicant to address, you know, and the board to realize what we're going after. I just want to be careful that if we make a motion to approve, you know, that those are just considerations versus things that are kind of a direct finding. That's just my knee-jerk reaction. So I don't know how everyone else feels about the
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Mr. Walker.
I hate to even bring this word up, but maybe this might be the better way of doing it, a postponement rather than trying to cobble together either an approval or denial of it, because there are a lot of moving parts still here, I think. And can we commit the township or the applicant to these things by what we say here?
I guess, you know, we have a right to make a motion to postpone. I think based on that we're recommending body, I would look to kind of have that discussion with the board, you know, similar to what we've had with other PUDs. So you know, I think we've seen some good movement here with what's proposed, so I would like to keep it moving along. So if anything, I want to include the other party in which this conversation exists within. So I hear you. I think I'm okay with making a recommendation, and I like the idea of having some items to consider. Just my knee-jerk, as already spoken, would be as, you know, maybe the flip-flop, but that's just my personal opinion about the motion. So, I mean, I think there's all very good facts here. I think if those were addressed, I think I could see this being a you know, valuable PUD in the township. I just think there's the big piece for me is the density as it relates to kind of those chain reaction effects. So if we were to proceed with all the units as they're proposed now, you know, I feel like that might be a slippery slope in my perspective, but, so, I guess, pose that to fellow planning commissioners to discuss. Go ahead, Mr. Gross.
I would like to clarify my motion. If I said approve, I meant favorable recommendation as opposed to approve.
I think we're getting into some gray.
I know we are.
So I don't think we want to get into that because we have attorney thoughts and all that kind of stuff. I think we either want to say approve or deny. What? Go ahead, Tammy.
You have three options. You can recommend approval, recommend denial, or postpone.
And we're not approving the final PUD plan by any means.
Correct, but keep in mind that concept addresses density, general layout, approach, right? So I think when you're saying recommend approval, you're assuming that there's going to be future details that come forth to us. So I'm not worried about some of those items. I think we can work through them. But we're looking strictly here on the idea of setbacks, on density, on the style of PUD that's being brought forth to us. So I think that's something to keep in mind at this stage.
And isn't it possible to recommend approval to the board with those concerns in mind? you know, knowing that those issues still may have to be addressed, as opposed to denying it, which could blow up the whole project.
Agreed. Tammy, go ahead. You had
To
comment.
clarify, the recommendation to approve can have conditions on it. So I know you're talking recommendation, I'm sorry, you were talking about considerations. Maybe there's a way to formulate it that they're conditions, that your recommendation is to approve with these conditions, so it's moving forward, and then the board would entertain your conditions that are contained within your recommendation.
So I guess as a clarification, that would be one way to propose it. If they are formally written into the record as a condition, I would support that list.
I guess the question is, what does the board see?
What do you mean, what it is?
If we approve this with conditions, they'll see the conditions
They will see the motion, they will
specifically?
get the formal motion.
As written into the record. So that would be my opinion, is them to be rather reworded as conditions rather than considerations.
I would make that amendment to the motion.
As a supporter, do you amend your support of the motion?
I do.
Okay. Further discussion on that. So to clarify, we have a motion to recommend the concept as presented on the May 9th plans, recommend approval with the condition that density is still an issue, and by reducing it would fix the underlying zoning issues and better address the residential zoning, including the landscape border on, buffer border and vista along Clarkston Road, and that it would review, there is a condition about the review of design as it relates to no garages or side garages are proposed rather than all front, that architecture ends up having a mix of design and color and style, so they're not all the same, and that unified control be addressed, whether that be under rental or ownership for both the units itself and the open space, and then addressing the planner's comments in their report is the current motion on the table. So further discussion. Okay, with that said, there's an opportunity for public comment on the motion. If someone's willing to make one, they can step up to the podium, state their name and address for the record, please. If you could keep your comments to approximately 3 minutes, that would be great.
My name is Heather Smiley. I have been a resident at 959 Hemingway for the last 22 years. I guess the main concerns that I have, the company, Insight LLC, has only been in good business standings for 3 of the last, I would say, 12 years per Laura. I live where I can see this property. I'm familiar with this property. I do believe that there are some swamp wetlands that are actually not accounted for. Maybe it's in that gray area where there's no building, which is fine. I'm new to plan drawings. I'm concerned about the EV ports in all the garages. Our electricity went out 3 times last week. We're on an older service on my side. I don't think that our transformers can handle what they're proposing. We're also on septic and sewer on our side of the street, which if I get any closer, I could probably point my house right out to you. What chemicals are they gonna use for the plantings, for the grass, for whatever, you know, they're building, the machinery, things like that goes right into our water table. And since the widening of Lapeer Road, our water table has actually dropped. How that all happens, I'm not really sure if it's linked to that. I'm kind of looking into that because I know that Lapeer Road now floods because we took away from wetlands. I feel that we've got a large drainage ditch that goes right on Clarkson Road, that if we really mess with Mother Nature too much, it's just gonna take its land back, quite frankly. I've been in conservancy my whole entire life. My uncle actually founded a conservancy, so this is something I know about. As far as the duplex, I mean, that's here or there. Our community in that area, we don't have any. We do have a minimum of probably an acre I'm on a smaller parcel and I have an acre. A lot of my neighbors have 2.5 acres plus. I think that the amount of 30 is not gonna be conducive for our traffic. Again, I live right there, so I see traffic from Clarkston backed up all the way to Hemingway Road, which if anyone's familiar, that's a good half-mile backup. School, before and after school, traffic, accident, anything like that. It's a 1-lane road on each side, you know, so building and widening the road to accommodate that isn't even necessarily possible. Again, with the drainage ditch that we got on the side, I think the proximity of the houses on the one side might be fine if we were to have to expand. But these are all things we have to take into consideration directly in our neighborhood. The congestion, the traffic, the construction, wildlife. I mean, my dogs have gotten out quite a few times. I've run that property. We've got sandhill cranes, we've got deer, we've got a whole bunch of stuff. And while I do totally appreciate the downsizing of, I thought original was 52 townhomes to what you have now, I still agree that I don't think it's conducive for the space. There are some other properties down on Lapeer Road. There is one that has been, for a convalescent center, it's been posted up for years and years, that might be more conducive to your planning because it is right off Lapeer Road. It has the access. It has the setting for electric, gas, things like that. So you wouldn't have to bring in as much and tear up as much of the land. And in regards to the trees that stand, as the way the parcel is, downsizing the amount of houses or duplex that you have would actually accommodate in the size that already has cleared land to where you wouldn't have to take down even 12 of the trees. Personal opinion, to keep, we got pileated woodpeckers and things like that. So again, I'm not against adding more homes necessarily, but I do think we have to really keep in consideration what we can handle at that area. So I appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments. Additional public comments?
Hello, my name's Catherine Kennedy. I live in Rochester off of Clarkston as well, but not as close to the parcel, but I'm very familiar with it. I actually would be curious to know who Daniel Johnson is. He did a nice interview, but the owner of the property is Insight LLC. Why are we not having somebody from Insight LLC responsible? The fact that they were behind on their annual reports for so many years. I didn't even know you were allowed to do 6 years at a time to do a catch-up to reinstate your company. In fact, I had a client long ago that missed filing 2 years and wasn't allowed by Lansing to reinstate and be in good standing with their company. So I'm not even sure how that even works, but I do know there would be a huge amount of infrastructure required. You would need sewer that doesn't exist, that there's nowhere to put it. If you've driven in the section of Clarkston Road between Hemingway and Pine Tree and Jocelyn, there's no place to put a road. It is not viable. You have multiple lakes on each side with the wetlands surrounding the lakes. There's no place to properly put any type of infrastructure to increase the road's capacity, to increase sewers, which would cause a lot of other problems like she just mentioned. There's so many issues that have not been considered. I actually believe the only thing that would be an appropriate use for it, unless they can condense down to where it's the part that's already cleared, because a good portion of the property is literally rolling woods, acres of rolling property. So the topography is not flat. You'd be wiping out every animal that's in that area, and there's a lot of, the entire community benefits from the wildlife. To obliterate all that would be so counterproductive to Orion Township, supposed to be where living is a vacation, not was. And I actually did try to send an email to you before. I'm not sure if I got through, but I'll try to get one to you in the morning. But I do have also concerns that they're using the theoretical master plan that the residents object to. We do not want urbanization in Lake Orion. Nobody asked us. How many citizens actually participated in the master plan that he apparently relied upon for information that we absolutely oppose? There's an awful lot going on that is outside influences, and they're not taking into consideration the people that actually pay the taxes and have lived here for decades. We moved here because we want rural. We're not an urban community, and we do not want urban expenses. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Additional public comments on the motion?
My name's Patricia Hamilton, and I live on Fairledge, 719 Fairledge. And I've lived there for 50 years because this is the area I wanted. I wanted houses. I didn't want to live with condos or apartments or anything else. We wanted to live there and raise our children there and grandchildren to play there. And traffic is a problem on Clarkston Road. And Fair Ledge is the road that everybody's going to come out on. That's where the driveway comes out. And we already have people that race through there now. That's the cut through. It's cut through for all the semis. It's the cut. You even had people on your board the last time that said that they use it for a cut through. Everybody does. Fair Ledge is the first road that goes through. And it's not safe for the kids. I, in fact, had a kid that got hit, ran right into a car because it was going down the road. And we went there because it was residential. And when we wanted to build, we had a lot of issues. So why aren't the rules the same for somebody else as it is for the restaurants or the residents that already live there? I mean, 50 years there, I like the area. It's quiet. I'm not against homes in there, but I'm not for duplexes. It's better than what was proposed the first time, but I'm still not impressed. And I don't plan on leaving the area anywhere soon. I plan on being around for a while. And I agree, but if they have the 22 lots, then do homes on 22. It's not my concern whether they can make an extra buck. That's not what Orion is about. We're not here to make somebody else an extra buck. We're here for our residents, for our people, so we can live like a vacation. But it's not getting to be that way. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Additional public comments? Okay. So just to reiterate, there is a motion to recommend approval to the Board of Trustees for the concept as presented here tonight for the May 9th plans as submitted with a number of conditions as made by the board as previously spoke to. With that said, can I have a roll call, please?
Gross.
Yes.
Walker.
Yes.
Angel.
Yes.
Bracken.
Yes.
Reynolds.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, that leads us to 8B on our agenda this evening for Township-initiated text amendment to zoning 78, Article 19, Industrial Complex IC, and General Provisions 27. Don't believe that was printed out for us in front of us tonight, but we did have a number of discussion items last meeting in regards to this section. Tammy, if you want to, is seeking comments, sorry.
Yeah, looking further down in your agenda, you'll see that we do have this scheduled for the public hearing at the next meeting. So I wanted to get this information in front of you at this meeting so that you could look it over. We had advertised that the text amendment would affect both Articles 19, which is IC, and 27, which is general provisions. We did end up with no changes to 27, but because we had advertised it that way, we listed it. But the proposed changes are only in the industrial complex section of the ordinance. This is all related to the expansion of General Motors. We only have one parcel within the township that is zoned IC, and that is General Motors. So this was written many years ago when General Motors first came to the township. And with the expansion they're proposing, in preparation for that, we've had multiple conversations and looked at an ordinance that was many, many years old and out of date. So these changes reflect conversations with them and an ordinance section that was out of date.
So if there's any comments, obviously at this point in time, this is the guess, overview that's being provided, the amendment as will be advertised and be discussed at our future public meeting on June 15th. Mr. Barnett.
Hi, good evening. I'm here for this item tonight. I think this might be the first time I've ever addressed the planning commission like this, but I think it's important just to give a brief update on what's been happening with the General Motors investment in our community. The news, we've been working on this for over a year, and then the official announcement started leaking in December and was made really official in January. But I just wanted to just give you an update that if you look at this ordinance, it's pretty clear that this zoning district was written for GM when it was originally instituted for this purpose. And if you look even deeper into the history of the township, you'll know this was the site that was potentially going to be a prison at one time, an airport, I think, a long, long time ago. So it is GM, and GM is planting their flag very soundly in our community. And I just wanted to tell you that, I mean, we are meeting daily on this project. There are some things we've been bringing the fire marshal along, the building official, certainly Tammy, and all of our consultants. But some of the things that would normally cause concern, like heights, that's one of the proposed changes. I mean, GM has a very specific use. I mean, the CEO has been on record stating this is going to be one of the most sophisticated auto manufacturing facilities on planet Earth. So a lot of the concerns of the heights of buildings and from fire and things like that have been addressed in our meetings. We're really confident that they're not looking to cut any corners. They're going to be building a showpiece as far as life safety and circulation and parts coming and going. They're talking about reinstituting or restarting the rail, which has been dormant for many years. A few sections of rail have been paved over, but they're looking at moving goods and materials in and out of the facility using the rail. So I just wanted to be here to just share with you, this is a little bit of a different text amendment and different zoning case probably that you might look at. Certainly not trying to tell you what to do, but the horse is way out of the barn on this one. And they're looking to break ground in the next couple months. And just a quick note on that, I mean, they're planning on having 80 construction trailers with 2,200 tradesmen and women on 2 10-hour shifts for a solid year of construction. So it's going to be a small city unto itself during construction. So if there are any questions, I just kind of wanted to just give you kind of an update that since the announcement on January 27th, it was quiet for about 45 days, and the last 30 days have been insane. There's literally not a day that goes by, including today. We had a large-scale meeting with a bunch of stakeholders on the paint shop. And then the one last thing I'll say on this is, it's going to come to you, and Tammy might mention this, and maybe she already has, but this will come to you different than other PC cases because they're looking to add about 4 million square feet, and they are really scrambling. Like they have a deadline because they have a model year vehicle that they already taking reservations on. So you might not see an entire complete site plan come in at once because there is a team of 100 people designing and working on the plan for the paint shop. There's a team of another 100 people working on these towers that are the tall part that are going to stack parts. Best way I can describe them, it's like the Carvana thing, where they load all these parts and robots go up and down and pull them and pick them and put them on the line. So just wanted to give you an overview that maybe give this a little bit of a different look as you're going through. The one thing I can tell you that I've seen so far, and I'll let Tammy and the other consultants speak on this if they want to, but they are not looking to cut corners. They're not looking to, they just need to move quickly, and they're looking for our assistance. And the message that we've given Mary Barra, the CEO, all the way down to the people we meet with is, we won't let you down. We're going to partner with you. We're going to be bringing on lots of third-party consultants because we don't have the capability. I told you they're going to bring 80 trailers out there for their trailer city for all their tradespeople. We're actually going to move a construction office out there. We're going to have a satellite township office so that the people that are working on the site don't have to drive back and forth here multiple times a day. We're going to be right there with them. So this entire project's going to look a lot different probably than anything that we've done in a long time. So I just wanted to be here to give you that little update. Thank you for your consideration on this item. And the good news is because it's the only parcel in the townships that's zoned this way, some of the things we looked at in this pre-discussion were, are we setting ourselves up for someone to come in and say, I want to be rezoned to IC, conditional rezone? Well, one of the first requirements is you have to be at least 2 million square feet. There's no facility even remotely close or site left in the township that would accommodate a 2 million square foot building. So just to throw that also out there, that we won't be putting ourselves in a corner to have 3 people at the next meeting saying, I want to fit this zoning, because it's really one user, and one user probably in all of Southeast Michigan. So that's it. Thank you. If you have any questions for me?
No, I think we're okay. I think bigger picture, right, Chris, just to point out, since it's alluding to the bigger discussion prior to our future public hearing, but, please take a look at the amended text. I think a lot of it, the amendment is acknowledging where manufacturing is, specifically IC as it exists in the township right now with the Orion plan, and some of these modified amendments are providing some flexibility, not let's say provisions to go around to, but just maybe some forward-thinking tools that aren't actually present in some of our other zoning districts. So some other landscaping tools and things like that. So all good things. It's not just a magic overhaul that doesn't adhere to our other requirements for projects either. So any other additional comments? So just duly noted, June 15th, I'll make a future announcement, but June 15th, there'll be a public hearing for the township initiated text amendment to zoning ordinance 78 for IC and the general provisions as just mentioned by Chris. Okay, that leads us to our next agenda item, which would be PC 21-07 5-year master plan update. We were provided, there was some elongated discussion last week in regards to, not last week, actually last meeting, in regards to our action strategies that would go into the master plan. So I guess take a look at this. If there's, they were picked up as discussed. If there's any discrepancies or any issues with those discussions as they're published in this section, just let us know. Anything else that you would like to add to that?
It's simple as that. We just filled it in as we were sitting there, so it should all be as you discussed.
Yep. So no action is taken on that tonight. That leads us to number 9, public comments. Is there any public comments that anyone would like to make? Seeing none, we have no communications or planner's education report. Sorry, you have a public comment? Okay, if you could keep your public comment to 3 minutes, that would be appreciated.
I will try. Thank you. My name's Catherine Kennedy, and I would like to address the master plan. I actually am very concerned with the way it was put together. There was not enough citizen participation, and I understand that it was started back in 2020, but I saw it for the very first time on May 18th at the open house for the Lake Orion to review the master plan. And that was not that long ago. And it was a little disconcerting because there wasn't anything really available before. And they said, well, yeah, it's been online all this time. Well, I was with a whole room of people that had no idea there was anything available anywhere to look at before. So in looking through it, I think they have a lot of concepts that are not what the community wants, that are actually being driven by the World Economic Forum and Oakland County Board of Commission, what they say they want for the community, which the community objects to, frankly. And I don't even think they totally understand what the implications are to turn everyone into digitization. And this is a big concern for me because it affects our entire world in reality. And we have seen right in front of our eyes things that should not be going on. But as citizens, we need to at least be kept aware and allowed to have a say in these matters. I understand the Waterford group, when they did their master plan, it was a 10-year plan, wasn't 5 years. They invited 70 citizens to participate, to provide input prior to creating the plan. They didn't farm it out to consultants, and that's actually what it appears to be. that all these important things are being farmed out to professional consultants that don't have anything to do, and they aren't elected by people in the county, in the community anyway. So what is going on here? Why are we changing our plans so quickly? I think it was only 5 years ago. It wasn't that long ago. And why are we not involving the communities and the residents that have been living here for decades, where we appreciate the green spaces, we appreciate the wildlife, and the proposals that are being brought here are basically low-income housing initiatives that it is rather frustrating to see. Twice now I've seen people that did not even apply under their actual legal entity name. Why is that okay? I think they need to actually apply under the actual entity that owns the property and that's actually going to be responsible for infrastructure development and have to rely on to actually do what they're saying they're going to do. So I have a real concern about all those things. So I would hope you take a serious second look, and why don't you ask the citizens? Because I tell you, the citizens don't know what's going on. They're ticked. Every time they find out about these things, they're quite upset. So I think it's very important to ask the citizens first. Thank you.
I'm not going to respond to public comment. Okay, thank you very much. We have no written communications this evening. We have no planners report. Committee reports, as previously mentioned, future public hearings. June 15th, 2022 at 7:05, we have our PC case 2022-22, Township Initiated Text Amendment to Zoning Ordinance 78, Articles 19, Industrial Complex IC, and 27, General Provisions. That leads us to our closing comments, starting with myself. Always appreciate people coming out to our meeting. Would like to just clarify a couple things. We are all appointed officials up here. We have been working on the master plan for over a year, you are correct. And we, on multiple cases, have invited the public in many, many, many ways to participate and have had many people partake in the master plan process. We've had online, in person, email. I'm not having a debate here. I'm just stating for the record that ourselves as planning commissioners have went out into the public to invite. Our meetings have always been publicized. They are online, they're on public television. We always welcome public input. We want that to be very clear. We are currently in the review period in which both surrounding communities, our citizens, ourselves are all welcoming additional public comment. And that's why we have this process not only for ourselves, but also to legally abide by the master plan process. The fact of why we're updating 5 years, 10 years, right? That's our effort to continue to stay on top of our master plan and not let it go stale and have frequent discussions as it relates to that. So I welcome people to get involved. I welcome people to apply for this board. You know, this is not my first choice to be here at 10 o'clock on a Wednesday night. And to be honest with you, we have many, many, many meetings with 0 people that show up to both PUDs, to master plan updates, to all of those things. So please come out and partake in our meetings, but do not have feelings that we haven't welcomed that input from the very beginning when we have, and we've been present and we welcome that. So that's my comments for this evening. Mr. Walker.
Nothing tonight.
Mrs. Gingell.
No comment.
Mr. Gross.
Nothing.
Mr. Bracken.
Nothing.
Okay, at this point in time, I have 7:05. I would make a motion to adjourn. Do I have support?
Support.
All those in favor, please stay with aye. Aye. Motion carries.